Bom, 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 bom. I'm going to that malt shop in the sky. I'm going to the place where people never die, and where the soda fountain never will run dry. In that malt shop in the sky. I'm going where they play the jukebox all day long, and everybody's singing a brand new song. I guess I'm gonna make it my turn home. Yes, that malt shop in the sky, where there'll be lots of falsetto, Lady of Faith. Yeah, the angels.
Enjoy the chess game of your life. Play chess with 32 beautiful brass pieces of your past. These sculptured chess pieces were created by a well-known artist, Don Desper. His work appears in many galleries, corporations, and homes throughout the world. The pawn characterizes that infamous gang, the Fortinbaldis. The figures wear a leather jacket and jeans. The rook is the castle-like Kingsbridge Armory with 2 turrets and a stairway leading to the entrance. The knight is a whimsical sculpture of 9 animals found at the Bronx Zoo. The bishop is modeled after the conservatory at the Botanical Gardens, complete with the lush vegetation that grows there. The Queen is our very own Lowe's Paradise Theater, with a facade capturing all the details from the clock to the ticket booth. And the King is Yankee Stadium, perched atop 3 baseball bats. Look carefully and you'll see the baseline and the pitcher's mound. And every piece isn't punched out of plastic or imitation wood, but handsomely molded brass, weighing over 10 pounds. Give yourself, a friend, or a relative a great treat with this great gift. And if you order, you'll get a special price on our limited edition. As always, there is a full money-back guarantee.
Do you remember not long ago those tunes we played even when we felt low? Just close your eyes, take a walk with me back through your memory. Your memory. Try to recall.
The Bronx. It was 42 square miles of farms and quiet streets when we were growing up. Some 1.4 million people lived here, more than now. Working class, neighborly, decent people. Parents watched out for their children, everyone's children, calling out warnings and advice from their windows overlooking our streets. We valued our neighborhoods, our friends, our very way of life, and recall them with fondness and nostalgia. Some think the Bronx wasn't so classy, but what do they know? Name one county, or any small foreign country for that matter, that has 16 colleges and universities. Our schools produce statesmen, 8 Nobel Prize winners in medicine and physics, the greatest journalists, authors, musicians, actors, athletes, and political and business leaders. The roster is so long and impressive that we're forced to question how a small borough in New York could have provided the ingredients that nurtured such prominence.
You're my love, you're my angel.
Not classy? The Grand Concourse, 180 feet wide with its renowned Art Deco buildings, was designed to emulate the Champs-Élysées in Paris.
Patiently, Daddy's home.
My address was 3235 Grand Concourse, right across from Villa Avenue. It was considered a fancier place in those days, living on the Concourse.
Elaborate mosaics and carved facades, grand ornamental lobbies, doormen, elevators, and apartments with sunken living rooms, parquet floors, modern kitchens and baths, and generous-sized rooms made the Concourse a fashionable place to live. And the Paradise Theater. Now that was a masterpiece. Built for $4 million in 1929, it had 4,000 seats, a night sky with clouds that drifted across, lights that twinkled like stars, and a skyline of statues and castles above the huge screen. Everything was gold and red velvet. Every nook had statues, busts, and urns. Every ceiling, chandeliers. Every wall, paintings and tapestries.
The aquarium on the stairways, they had attendants in the men's room giving out towels and spraying perfume.
I mean, it was luxurious. I mean, I remember the red colors. I remember the ornate atmosphere. I mean, the curtains.
The ceiling looked like a sky. It was a zodiac.
They had the stars up there. You'd sit up there and look up in the moon, you know. And if you thought you'd get lucky, in those days, lucky meant a kiss.
Paradise Theater was when you had a sort of a major date or someone you really wanted to impress.
We used to take girls there and look up in the stars.
The thing that was so beautiful about it is before you even went into the movie house, everything leading up to the movie house was gorgeous.
One guy would buy a ticket, he would open the door, and 10 of us would slip in.
Well, that's where my movie with Marlon Brando premiered, many years later in the 70s. And the wonderful thing is that on the marquee, you know what a big star Marlon Brando was, on the marquee it said, "The night of the following day, starring our own Rita Moreno." And then underneath in small letters it said, "with Marlon Brando."
For the price of admission, you entered paradise. And you got to see a double feature, cartoons and newsreel, too. Well, maybe some people weren't so classy, throwing popcorn off the balcony. Oh, I never did that. We had plenty of culture. There were those field trips to the Botanical Gardens, the oldest and largest conservatory in the world, with its domed glass buildings, each with its own climate, plants with labels, and acres of roses and tulips.
The blast of colors that you saw every place you went, the variety of flowers and the colors everywhere. And I think for someone when you grew up in the Bronx, you weren't as exposed to it as a suburban person.
Outings often took us to the Bronx Zoo, through those fancy wrought iron gates to the little trolley. We couldn't wait to see the elephants, where we waved a shelled peanut, then gingerly dropped it into the swaying trunk.
The elephant pit in the zoo, and the outside elephant pit, the wall is only 2.5 feet on the outside, but it's about 10 feet on the inside, because the elephants can come up and put their chin right on the thing. And there's 3,000 volts running around the inside of that thing to keep jerks like me out. And there was a pigeon in there that I wanted to get, and I tried to climb over this thing. When I touched the wire, it felt like something, like I had got kicked in the chest. When they revived me, I was back on the grass, and they were like jumping on me.
The reptile house, the monkey house, the children's zoo in the African plains, a pioneering natural habitat. And if you timed it right, you could wait online to throw slimy little fish to the barking sea lions that clap their fins in thanks. That's what I call culture. Our zoo rivaled anything like it in the world. And, of course, our beach clubs with pools and pavilions, Castle Hill, Shorehaven, and others where not everyone could get in. You had to be a member and have a pass with your picture on it. And you could rent a private locker. Some people had them for decades and decorated them with carpeting and pictures. Locker location, now that was a status symbol.
Knocking at my front door, crazy little mama come knocking, just like she did before.
And of course, the girls would go there to get picked up. You know, you'd dance and upstairs, you know, and you'd get picked up by some guy. The guys would get picked up by some girl, whatever.
There stood my baby looking in my eyes, crazy little mama come knocking, just like she did before.
The strict rules about swimming. You must wait 1 hour after you eat before you go in swimming, or you die immediately.
Meanwhile, the Irish kids and the black kids were in the water eating hot dogs in the water, floating. Well, the Jewish and Italian kids sat like this and said, "Is it a half hour yet? We could go in the water."
The amount of time you had to wait was according to what you had. You know, American cheese sandwich, 35 minutes. Pickle, 38 minutes. Yes, Jell-O, 4 minutes. Frankfurters and beans, can't go in swimming this year. Too heavy. You can never go swimming again.
And we had a little cottage in Silver Beach. My mother sold it after my father died. Get this, for $800. Lord, Lord.
There was swimming, dancing, sports, and card games like canasta, pinochle, rummy, steal the old man's bundle, go fish, war, and the questionable knucks and 52 pickup. Inescapable were the intonations of one bam, two crack, three dot, red dragon, soap, and mahjong, coming from an array of card tables around the grounds.
This afternoon, the weather's very nice. Temperature 86 degrees as Tony Orlando sings the number 12 song on the 70s.
And then there was Orchard Beach, with its pavilion and 1.1 miles of sand, beach chairs, portable radios that weighed a ton, and colorful plastic pails and shovels dotted our popular waveless beach.
I once said Orchard Beach is where the beer cans come to spawn.
Oh, Orchard Beach all the time in the summer, all the time.
Some folks preferred not to use the bathhouse and changed out of wet bathing suits inside an improvised terry cloth booth engineered by Mom. Beach towels, including those used as nets to catch tiny fish at the shoreline, were rolled up inside the blanket for that trip home.
When I was 14 years old, I started working in Orchard Beach. And that was terrific because you would get out of bed every morning and you'd go to the beach.
And you wore a pith helmet, boots, and khaki uniform. And while everybody was on the beach in bathing suits, you were walking around through the sand yelling, "Soda!" And they looked at the weather report. And if the weather was good, they hired everybody. If the weather wasn't bad, they just picked it. They'd throw tokens. Whoever grabbed the token worked.
Classy? Absolutely. This was the Bronx Riviera.
When you dance.
Our shopping was classy, too. Service has always been the hallmark of upscale retail stores. In our neighborhoods, boutique owners and even chain stores made service their credo. In the shoe store, for example, a salesperson would measure your foot on an adjustable metal form and then tirelessly bring out box after box of shoes, shoehorning them on, lacing them, and reboxing them for you. In those days, sneakers were only worn to gym, so shoe shopping was a frequent expedition. Alexander's even offered fluoroscope to x-ray your feet for a perfect fit.
So you'd put your feet into the x-ray machine and you'd be able to see the bones in your feet. I guess at that point they didn't realize that the radiation could probably kill you.
Trips to the larger stores like Alexander's, Loehmann's, Sears, and Macy's Parkchester were true excursions.
I mean, my mother had 7 kids. We spent hours and days in Alexander's. I got lost in Alexander's department store.
Shoppers ravished the sales counters and languished on the return line, while staff worked diligently to process products of every description. Some local stores were ideal for specialties.
We went shopping for clothes at Robert Hall's. Robert Hall's is cheaper. How does it go?
When the values go up, 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 and the prices go down, 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 Robert Hall's this season will show you the reason. Low overhead. I still haven't I haven't forgotten the commercial on the radio.
Low overhead because they had no mannequins in the store, but they were using the most expensive form of advertising available at the time, radio.
Hijinks, which was everyone's favorite store on Jerome Avenue. It was the sporting goods store. And that's where you got your Clinton jacket, and that's where you got your baseball glove and your bat.
Vim, the Vegas, Joe Tuckman, Bob Cuffs, Bonds, Howard's, Honig's, Maddow's Jewelry, W.T. Grant, John's Bargain Stores, National Shoes, Robert Hall, Tom McCann's, Woolworth, and Buster Brown were among them. There, a customer was treated like a patron. Some people mistakenly think of the Bronx as a city, a large sprawling landscape of concrete, bricks, pavement, and fast-moving traffic with few amenities for people. When we were growing up in the borough of the Bronx, none of us thought of it that way.
Even today, despite the urban growth, almost a quarter of the Bronx is parkland. At 2,765 acres in size, Pelham Bay Park is the largest park in New York City. The Bronx also has 4 municipal golf courses, among them the first public golf course in America, built in 1895 in Van Cortlandt Park. Everyone growing up lived near a park. Crotona Park, Claremont Park, Bronx Park, McCombs Dam Park, Echo Park, St. Mary's Park, Poe Park, St. James Park, and Joyce Kilmer Park, to name a few. The Bronx had more green space than any other urban area in the USA. True, however, the rural environment started to give way to a more urban setting with the arrival of the IRT from Manhattan to the Bronx. It emerged from 149th Street and 3rd Avenue, becoming the White Plains Road line. The 3rd Avenue L gradually extended its elevated tracks northward toward the Bronx as well. The D line rushed as far as Norwood. As more and more rail routes were added, we were never far from a subway line.
MBA motorman, they guide your train.
One of the most familiar sounds of my childhood was the 3rd Avenue L making the turn at Webster Avenue, Gun Hill Road.
First thing you did was to fight to get to the first car. You had to get to the first car. The first car was where the motorman was. He sat locked up in this little tiny room, and you could see out the window as the train went along, and you had that feeling of speed. You had that feeling of, hey, look what I'm doing, I'm driving. Hey, I love to pull into the station. You could see the people as you're pulling into the station. And you could see the difference in the neighborhoods by the people getting on and off the trains. And people ate in the trains, they drank in the trains, they tried to smoke in the trains, even though the sign said no spitting or smoking. And it had a characteristic smell of burning wire.
My mother and father met on the 3rd Avenue L. She got on at Fordham Road. My father got on at 139th Street, I believe. And their relationship started that way because those days you couldn't communicate by phone. Conversation was always on the 3rd Avenue L.
Time you board a train, there awaits a friend.
From the Woodlawn train, you could see Yankee Stadium itself, just for a moment, of course, and briefly share the outfield and stands with DiMaggio or Mantle or Berra.
Back. He makes a one-handed catch against the bullpen.
Electrically powered trolley lines were also added, tempting daredevil kids on bikes to grab hold of the cars from the rear and hitch a ride until the conductors chased them off. In the late 1940s, bus lines took over their routes. Highways and suspension bridges, beginning with the Triborough Bridge in 1936, the Whitestone in 39, the Major Deegan in 55, the Throgs Neck in 61, and the Cross Bronx Expressway in 65 were to have a major impact.
Boom, 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 boom.
With mass transportation reaching our rural neighborhoods, people began to move from the tenements in Manhattan to the Bronx, occupying new apartment buildings that investors scrambled to build. Apartment living became the typical lifestyle, with smaller private houses and townhouses sandwiched between them. The population, just 732,000 in 1920, jumped to over 1.2 million in just 10 years.
My aunt lived there, my grandparents lived there, and they had 5 tenants. We had the Finkelsteins, and we had the Carols, and we had a United Nations in the building.
You know, my parents were working class people. They worked. My mother worked in the sweatshops as a seamstress. My father works you know, as a hand worker in a printing factory.
And we never got enough heat. So when we'd go to sleep, I slept in one bed with my brother, and my mother would throw coats on us.
And for many years, we banged on a radiator, and I think that went on for a number of years, and then somebody says, nobody's listening, they're not sending up heat, we got to move to Florida. If somebody would have sent up heat when we hit the radiator, I don't think everybody would have moved to Florida.
We had one bathroom. And my daughter said, how could you live with one bathroom? I said, everybody lived with one bathroom. She said, well, what if you both had to go to the bathroom at the same time? I said, well, somebody had to wait.
There were dumbwaiters in the apartments. Dumbwaiters. Dumbwaiter was a place where you put your garbage, and you'd have a rope on this little thing, and you'd have to haul it up to get the dumbwaiter, and that place just stunk. So what my father did, in order to preserve the health of our apartment, is he sealed up the dumbwaiter.
I lived in a two-family home with a vestibule and a stairway inside the house that would take people up to their apartment on the second floor. It was owned by my great aunt, an Italian woman, who was scared to death of nothing, you know. They had a large, well, we called it a farm, but it was a full acre of tomato plants, corn. She grew it right outside. When I went back years later, when I came back to New York, I went up to see, and that had all been graveled in, and it was then a parking lot.
At times, the apartment building developments were substantial. Parkchester, completed in 1941, had 12,000 apartments, housing 52,000 people. Planners included playgrounds, ball fields, gardens, pathways, and sitting areas.
The Parkchester patrolman. Here was a guy who had no real status whatsoever. And the 43rd Precinct never went anywhere near Parkchester because they left it up to the people who ran it. And the Parkchester patrolman would take your name if you ran on the grass. Imagine that threat today.
Co-op City, built in the late 1960s along Eastchester Bay, consisted of over 15,000 apartments in buildings from 24 to 33 stories high. In sheer size, it was the largest housing development in the world. Luxury apartment buildings sprung up in Riverdale and public housing in the south of the county.
77 Radio in New York, WABC. I'm Jack Carney. We're at Freedom Land. Where are you? Why aren't you here? Want to have fun? Come join us. We're in the Opera House.
For a while, from 1960 to 1964, we even had the ultimate park, Freedom Land, USA, a park shaped like the United States. The theme was to depict moments and places in American history, including the Chicago Fire, the San Francisco earthquake, a paddle wheel tour of the Great Lakes, and a Pony Express ride through the Great Plains.
There was this band shell where, I mean, the huge names of the musical industry used to come and play. I mean, you had all the big bands come through there. And I got this girl from the neighborhood date first time. And I said, you know, I'd like to just go over to the Moon Bowl and just listen for a little. Sure. The schedule was Kenton did like a 45 or 50-minute set every hour on the hour from, I think, 9 to midnight. I stayed for all 4, I think it was. You know, and I kept saying to her, could we just stay? She never talked to me again.
Freedom Land in the Bronx, bordered by the Hutchinson River Parkway and the New England Thruway. Parking for 10,000 cars, 30 minutes from Times Square by the IRT subways. Admission 50 cents to $1.
Though Freedom Land didn't last long, one Bronx park became nationally known and a cultural symbol of America's favorite sport of baseball, Yankee Stadium, the home of champions.
The stadium was built by Ruth, the Iron Horse was in his youth, the Yankees lineup was a murderer's row. And after Huggins' reign, they were champions again, and winning became the only game for Marcia Joe. I'm talking baseball.
The acquisition of Babe Ruth from the Boston Red Sox in 1920, the Yankees were breaking attendance records at the Polo Grounds, which it shared with the New York Giants. Seeking a venue of its own, the Yankees purchased a 10-acre lot across the Harlem River in the Bronx and designed the first three-tier ballpark. It held 70,000 people and opened for its inaugural game in 1923. Babe didn't disappoint the crowd of nearly 75,000, hitting a 3-run homer.
So these buildings that they had overlooking the L, we used to go up to the buildings and go and sit on the roof and peer off the roof over the bleachers into the Yankee Stadium to watch the games.
The first player I met in the Yankee clubhouse was Mickey Mantle, and I wasn't even able to speak. I looked up at him, and I was a baseball fan for 9 years before that, and here I am right next to Mantle. When he hit number 61, I was in the on-deck circle, and I started to cry because I was so happy for him that the pressure was off him. And when he came home, when he came across the plate and I shook his hand, he saw me, I had tears in my eyes. He came in the dugout after me, and he put his arm around me. He said, "We did it."
My father took me there, and I never forgot it when he took me there as a little kid, and I saw the green field, and I never forgot that image. And I took my son there. Now my son, I take him there.
During the Second World War, the ball players lived in the neighborhood, so we rooted for them. They were kind of unknown players in the Second World War, like Garbark. Raleigh Hemsley, I think, was here. Names: Roy Weatherly, Herschel Martin, Russ Derry. Unknown names. Mike Garbark is his name. He went 0 for 32 and then hit a double, and the neighborhood cheered.
Yes, I must have been about 10 or 11, and they told us, "We're going to pick you up on Walton Avenue in the 7th inning of the second game." Okay. First game went 12 innings, and the second game was tied in the 7th inning. And my sister Debbie said, "Come on, we got to go. Mommy and Daddy waiting outside." Wouldn't leave. 10th tied, 11th, 12th, 13th tied. My sister's saying they're going to kill us. At the 16th inning, she goes, "That's it. They're going to kill you. You better go now." And I said, "I'm going to get a beating anyway. I better leave." So we went. My father was steaming. He was standing on Walton Avenue for 3 hours.
I'm talking baseball. Bill Dickey and Lazari, Yankee baseball.
Our ballpark now boasts 26 world championships and 38 American League pennants. It sure was worth the subway ride in the hot sun and the bleachers. It was priceless.
Especially Willie, Mickey and the Duke. Ba 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 boom ba 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 boom ba 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 ba
Thinking of the Bronx as a city might imply that its residents were tough, destructive, and intimidating. In the Bronx of our youth, tough, well, that was a relative thing. Everyone had heard of the gangs in the Bronx, particularly the so-called Fordham Baldies, the Golden Guineas, the Fordham Daggers and Boca Chicas, the Cobras, the Imperial Hoods, Scorpions, Young Sinners, and the Italian Berettas, to name a few.
But at that time, it was a gang here and a gang there and a gang that's been around in the poor neighborhoods, that's been around forever.
Fordham Baldies were funny guys. They were tough. But I was pretty tough too. But I ended up friends with everybody. But I was maybe 14 years old when I ran into them and the Bronx.
There was a story of this one guy who didn't have teeth in his front mount, and they caught this one guy who was really who beat up one of their guys, and the guy told me that he said, "I don't have teeth in my mouth, now you're not going to have teeth in yours," and they actually pulled some of his teeth out with the pliers. Which that's the story that I heard.
I was a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old. I would fight for pennies and nickels and dimes, and they'd throw it on the mat. And after the one round fight, we took off our gloves and we'd pick up the pennies and nickels. It added up to a couple of bucks, and I gave it to my father, and I helped him pay the rent.
For most kids, however, these gangs remained only urban legends. Schoolgirls feared having their braids cut off by gang members. Guys banded together in case they ran into JDs, juvenile delinquents, that is, and had to defend themselves.
I mean, there was a status system. Whoever could grab you by the hair and throw you down on the ground was in charge.
Nevertheless, there were always rumors of rumbles. In the high school yard, the tougher kids, the hoods, the rocks, who stood their collars up and let their hair fall casually onto their forehead, were to be avoided.
Guys would, stop you on a snowy day and line you up against the wall and throw snowballs at you. They were tougher than you. Later in life, when I went to Hollywood, some screaming, temperamental actor and actress didn't scare me at all. What the hell? They're just they're going to throw a snowball and hit me. They're going to not pull my hand, throw me on the ground.
But the Bronx of our youth, until the hard-edged 70s, was the age of innocence. Our neighborhoods were safe. Many people didn't lock their doors. Fear meant fear of being told on by a neighbor to your mother, reported to the super, getting an F on your report card. Fear was getting chosen last for your team, losing your Spalding down the sewer, not being asked to dance, or being turned down.
Families were close in those days, There were families, everybody ate at the same time. Everybody knew what everybody was doing.
In those days, the Bronx was very rustic, and there were vast lots, and people would plant, great stuff.
My grandfather on Taylor Avenue used to make wine in the cellar. I used to help him. And as a child, he used to give me a glass of red wine and Italian bread. I used to dip the bread in the wine, and I drank wine like 5, 6 years old.
My mother had caramelos, they call them, candies in her purse, and they didn't have anything to eat, and they made soup out of the candy, and they ate that for 3 days or something. And I'm very ashamed of my comment. What I said to her, I said, "You must have had fabulous figures."
We had a meal every Friday night at my grandmother's house, and all the aunts and uncles would show up, and I'd sell them this paper for a penny a copy. All family news. Grandma bakes sponge cake. She uses real sponges, stuff like that.
We all gave nicknames. If you were Hilkowitz, the Jewish boy, we call him Hilly.
If you didn't have a nickname, you weren't loved.
When they asked my mother, "Is Red there?" She said, "Who?" "Red." She said, "Who?" "Oh, is Harold there?" She wanted me to call Harold.
All the people used to sit outside on chairs, beach chairs. We were all, garbage cans were outside, and all the women were outside with their knitting.
It was a real community because there was that woman that always looked out of the window, and if she saw you doing something strange, your mother knew it.
Perhaps the greatest fear we shared back then, though a vague one for most of us kids, was fear of an enemy attack by a foreign nation, specifically fear of the A-bomb. Our schools exercised vigilance, issued dog tags, and had us periodically perform take-cover drills. Remember how we ducked under our desks, facing away from windows, with our arms protecting our head? Now, who thought of that one?
Children, 3 blasts, the nuclear holocaust, and I want an orderly nuclear holocaust, no talking.
The Bronx was simply not a world of fear. It was a neighborhood of family and friends, of teachers and clergy, mailmen, police on the beat, the good humor man, the local merchants, the crossing guards, the lunch lady, the park attendant, the hall monitors, the supers, and all the other people who made our world in the Bronx the community it was.
In those days, most conventional wisdom came from our parents and grandparents.
My mother used to say to me, "Joe, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice."
My mother said something about prostitutes. She read in the paper. My father grabbed my mother by the hand and said, "Don't talk in front of the kids." And I said, "The kids are in bed." He meant me. I was 32 years old.
You'd hear, "A man showed his spooky to Burton Resnick. Don't let that happen to you."
As for more formal wisdom, we had our public elementary, junior high, high school, and parochial schools to lay the foundation for our future.
The public school I went to was PS 64, which was at the corner of Walton Avenue and 170th Street.
I went to PS 80.
I went to PS 35, PS 90,
PS 36. Public school number 68.
St. Anselm's Elementary School.
PS 93.
PS 95.
Public school 53.
PS 54. PS 74.
PS 63, then Mott Junior High School 22.
PS 35.
I went to PS 90. St. Angela Marisi.
St. Francis Xavier.
Lydia Montcalm.
St. Philip Neri. I went to St. Margaret's.
I want to be the kind of boy the 94 can boast about. I want to be the kind of boy that it can never live without.
The Bronx on Roberts Avenue stands a school of which we're proud.
80, dear 80, your name will rise above 79.
Submarines were ready, the race had all been planned.
We sang even sentimental anthems. 113, we love thee, to 2 and 3 digit numbers, which is reminiscent of the Soviet Union. Think Steel Factory number 8 in Minsk.
The night was moonlit as we walked by the sea, and so romantic. My girl said to me,
who would win the submarine race? The submarine race tonight.
Submarine race tonight. The night was moonlit as we walked by the sea, and so romantic. My girl said to me,
who would win the submarine race? The submarine race tonight.
Submarine race tonight. I held her tightly, my heart was fluttering. I tried to kiss her, but she was wondering
where those submarines were that night.
Submarines were that night.
We walked to school or had bus passes, learned to read with Dick and Jane, practiced penmanship, memorized multiplication tables, lost at spelling bees, wore white shirts to auditorium where a psalm and a pledge were recited. Occasionally we put on school performances, learned to line up and size place, changed in our lockers, obeyed safety monitors, stayed in line at fire drills, charged down stairwells, envied teachers' pets, laughed at the class clown, avoided the class bully, found someone to pick on, got picked on by others, and brought our school lunches or bought them for pennies. We knew about inkwells, blotters, pencil boxes, book covers, wooden rulers with the golden rule on them, and report cards to be signed.
And the worst crime was talking, Talking, no talking.
At last, we reached high school. According to where you lived, you attended Evander, Clinton, Roosevelt, Walton, Taft, Columbus, Morris, and Monroe, among others. And if you were eligible, Bronx High School of Science, Stuyvesant in Music and Art. Or you attended parochial school, among them Cardinal Hayes, Academy of Mount St. Ursula, All Hallows, Fordham Prep, St. Barnabas, and St. Raymond's. There were vocational high schools and yeshivas as well.
Well, first of all, DeWitt Clinton was an all-boys school, so it made it a little tough.
It took me years to overcome a reticence with women.
Any female faculty member under 90, under 300 pounds, was considered a sex object.
And then I went away to Cardinal Hayes High School, all boys. Then I went to Notre Dame, all boys. So I had little experience with girls. As a matter of fact, you're looking pretty good to me right now.
You know, they would take your lunch money and all those things. They were always tough kids.
And the motto was, if you don't win the game, make sure you win the fight.
I went to Bronx High School of Science, so my friends lived all over. Kingsbridge, Fordham Road, Jerome Avenue, South Bronx, Tremont.
Now, as young adults, we were further immersed in literature, foreign language, team sport, shop, or home ec, and music and art. At the same time, our traditional subjects, especially math and English, got harder and harder. Then came the dreaded finals, and the worst, state-mandated Regents exams, where we took practice tests from handbooks, tutored and quizzed one another, and prayed to attain scores good enough for graduation with its caps and gowns, diplomas, congratulations, class yearbooks, proms, corsages, and autograph albums. Remember the M, remember the E, put them together, and remember me. As bad as they were, somehow these educational pressures were always outdone by the social pressures, trying to fit in at the least or be popular at the best, and underlying it all, the desire to be attractive to the opposite sex.
Well, you can dance, every dance with the guy who gives you the eye and let him hold you tight. You can smile, if you smile at the man.
There used to be dances in St. Helena's, in Parkchester, and St. Nicholas of Talentine, and places like that, and all of the kids from parochial schools would go to the dances and see if they can get lucky. The girls were on one side, the boys were on the other side. When you danced, there was nuns and chaperones walking around and saying, "Leave room for the Holy Ghost," and things like that.
Took my girl to the Laconia Theater. Across the street was Frank's Pizza Parlor. And for $1.25, I looked like King Kong. We had a pizza and a Coke, you know, and she thought she died and went to heaven, you know.
And don't forget who's taking you home and in whose arms you're gonna be.
In the days before the internet, trends and fads traveled effectively throughout the Bronx by word of mouth, by ads, and advice in popular magazines and television.
Can't you feel it when we touch?
If boys wanted to attract the girls, fashion in the 1940s through 1970s was complicated. Guys could wear polo shirts, penny loafers, saddle shoes, peg pants, T-shirts with rolled sleeves, Oxford white shirts, polyester shirts, paisley shirts, bell-bottoms, white bucks, Keds, Izods, Levi's, PF Flyers, black leather jackets with turned-up collars, desert boots, and team jackets.
Ralph Lauren, his name was Ralph Lifshitz, tremendously stylish, and those polo games he organized in the schoolyard. I mean, we had to keep the horses in the basement. It was just so hard.
Girls, on the other hand, had poodle skirts, Angora sweaters, peg skirts, cinch belts, ankle bracelets, charm bracelets, pedal pushers, bobby socks, halter and tube tops, cardigans worn forward and backward, and new silhouettes, the sheath, sack, shirtwaist, shift, and chemise. To say nothing of mini, micro, maxi, and midi, pleated, peg, flare, and A-line skirt.
I wore the crisscross shoes and the skirt with the poodle on it.
And we used to wear our cardigan sweaters backwards with 2 or 3 buttons opened up.
I remember that stretch pants came in.
I wore colored pantyhose, scarves around my neck. I still like to dress like that.
You're my love, you're my angel, you're the girl.
Hair fashion was equally important. Ducktails and ponytails, pompadours and page boys, flat tops and French twists and afros and flips were all preserved and enhanced with bobby pins, dippity-doo, aqua velva, aquanet, taboo, brute, Old Spice, Canoe, Breck, and Brill Cream. A little dab will do ya. In the Bronx, if we weren't dating, we invariably hung out in groups. You could find us at White Castle, consuming sacks of square beef patties with 5 holes, chopped onions, slices of pickled ketchup, all packed into a steaming bun.
White Castle was the hangout. Yeah, on Fordham Road. I mean, you could get 2 burgers and a soda for 25 cents. We were in 7th Heaven.
Schweller's on Jerome Avenue. I remember you could go there, and it was the first time I had realized you could sit down there. They'd give you a bowl of pickles. They'd put bread out. You could practically have a decent meal without paying a penny. We would shop there in Mike's Deli, and I still go there. I still go to Mike's Deli all the time.
There was a place called Joe Tenori. He sold sandwiches for 35 cents that were just wonderful. You know, different cuts of meats and cheeses. In fact, my mouth's watering now as I'm talking about it.
In my neighborhood, there was a store where we used to get French fries in a brown paper bag for 5 cents, you know, and they were the most delicious things.
There's even Italian Iceman outside of the PS53. We get pistachio, you know, that sort of vanilla, and I love pistachio. And the pretzel man was there.
For sweets, we went to Jan's old-fashioned ice cream parlor, decorated with wooden booths and Tiffany-style lamps, and famous as the home of the renowned kitchen sink and banana boat.
We'd go in about 15 of us, and you'd have this kitchen sink, which was tremendous.
They say feeds 4 to 6, but I think it feeds anywhere from 8 to 14. 32 scoops of ice cream.
With whipped cream and nuts and all kinds of things.
It was just this melange of ice cream.
Or we went to Crumbs for a soda and bag of candy selected from bins of compelling treats. With one or a few of our best friends, in the Bronx you could have several best friends, we spent time at bowling alleys, ball fields, and the movies.
On Hughes Avenue was a small theater. It was originally called the Savoy Theater. Cinelli's had a couple of names. And Saturday afternoon, you'd go there for 25 cents. It was wonderful. You see 10 cartoons, the Three Stooges. In fact, I saw On the Waterfront there. I fell asleep in the theater that day. My mother had to come to look for me because I was gone the whole day. There I was, laying on the floor.
Are you going to show? You're going to the show, which meant are you going to the movies? Now our movie was Loews, and it was Loews, not Lowe's. Loews American.
We went to the Earl Theater, 161st, and the Kent, I think it was.
We would go to the Fleetwood. We call it the Bug House. And you know, there'd be 10 cartoons and 2 features.
And what they had were races. They had these crazy guys that would have bicycle races or car races, whatever, and they'd give everyone a ticket for a number to correspond with the people who were racing on the screen. And after the race movie was over, they'd come and you'd say, okay, the winners are 5, 6, and 8, you get the prizes. And they literally gave you prizes like you were betting, pari-mutuel betting, in the movie theater.
In the playgrounds, we raced to the flat swings, getting a push to get started, then pumping our legs to get higher and higher, or the slides and seesaws, or the occasional wading pool. Last one in is a rotten egg.
The New York park system had these free pools, which are not really pools. They were like puddles in the middle of a park with concrete, and they just fill this area up with water. The water was probably maybe 2.5, 3 feet high, and you'd go there and actually swim with a rough pavement underneath you.
In the summer, we played catch, climbed trees, rode our Schwinns or English racers in the parks.
There were 3 vacant lots throughout my childhood, and each had its specialty. All had dog excrement.
In the winter, we navigated the snowy hills on the flexible flyers, built snowmen with coal eyes, or ice skated on a bumpy pond.
We had ski patrols, sled patrols that told people they're being reckless.
Well, now I asked your sister Mary, and I asked your sister Sue, I even asked your brother, say what became of you, oh darling.
In the schoolyards, we chose up teams for punchball, softball, or basketball.
We played basketball 3 times a day. We played in gym during school, after school in the schoolyard, and in the evening center.
I just walked outside and there was 25 guys and we had fun. I would leave in the morning and not come back till the night.
We didn't have a field with grass, we had a dirt field. The outfield had no fences, it had kind of a wall of dirt in the outfield.
Played Flies Are Up, Ring-a-Levio, and Skelly, or flew wooden glider planes and kites with homemade tails.
Every season there was a different game that we would play. It would be skating, and it would be
kick the can and triangle.
Shooting tickets.
Ring-a-levio.
Punch ball.
Tackle football in the street.
We used to play potsy.
Johnny and the Pony.
Hopscotch.
Spin the bottle. Believe it or not, even at a young age, we had a little romance going.
Stoop ball. Used to have little chestnuts that you put on a string and you try to knock each other out.
We played poker for Wild West cards, the closest I ever came to be a gambler. It's the only vice I don't have.
On the sidewalks, we played marbles and jacks, practiced our Duncan yo-yo moves, played potsy, hit the penny, Simon Says, red light, green light, jumped rope, and roller skating.
The skates that we used in those days were skates that attached to the bottom of your shoe. They were adjustable in a couple of ways. One, you could adjust it to the width of your foot, and you just tightened it with a key. They called it a skate key.
Then, of course, if you were smart enough to have roller skates and didn't tell your brothers, who would take them apart and make go-karts out of them and find the biggest hill.
We get a box, and we get a long 2x4, and we put the box on top of the 2x4 and got skates and put the two wheels underneath the 2x4 so to make a scooter.
We watched with a good humor man, the bungalow bar truck whose ice cream bars sometimes contained lucky sticks. Upon hearing their characteristic bells or music, some of us yelled up to our apartment window, "Hey, Ma, throw down some change."
All the kids would come flying out with their money and everybody would get their ice cream. We terrorized the good humor man, by the way.
That bell could have been the bells of heaven. It could have been Beethoven's symphony. It could have been Tchaikovsky and Brahms and Beethoven all put together.
We also had a ice cream truck named Uncle John, and I think ultimately Uncle John lost his truck because it was determined that he was selling more than ice cream out of the truck.
The ultimate street sport, however, was stickball, where you followed most of the rules of baseball, but sewers and hydrants were bases, broomsticks were bats. Cars stopped to let you make a play, and you begged your mom for 10 more minutes to finish the game.
Couldn't have a real broom around the house because we'd break the sticks off and use them as stickball bats.
Stickball bats. All the brooms were
stickball bats.
At the center of most of our favorite sports was the cherished Spalding ball, or Spaldines as we call them. This pink rubber ball, judiciously selected from the box by comparing the height of its bounce, was key to most of our sports. Hit the penny, catch, and the revered stickball game depended on it, while the girls' alphabet rhyme, "A, my name is Alice, and my husband's name is Al. We come from Alabama, and we sell apples," lent a rhythm to the streets. To lose our ball down a sewer was a catastrophe. This event led to inventive trolling for lost balls. Broomsticks with gum at the end were a favorite. The adult who retrieved the ball was the hero of the block. So now and again, you could find us in the streets, an intent audience for a daring rescue. More often than not, though, we could be found at the candy store, guzzling a chocolate egg cream made with You Bet syrup, seltzer, and milk in just the right combination and stirred with a pretzel rod according to your neighborhood. A black and white ice cream soda, cherry lime Ricky, banana split, or malted. They certainly hit the spot.
I like chocolate malted. I like potato chips too.
I had the boss standing right next to me, you know. He would show me how to scoop the ice cream so that I didn't dig into it and take a lot, but as I scooped it, I made a roll so it looked like a lot, but it was all hollow in the middle.
After school, there was usually a quick stop for those hard-to-resist penny candies, wax lips or mustache. Not too tasty.
Sometimes people would eat these lips too, you know. They would cut them up and chew them.
Wax bottles filled with colored liquid. Bite off the top and drink the syrup.
I only like lemon and lime. The others I would throw away.
Licorice strings, bazooka or Fleer's double bubble, dots on strips of paper. And some of that paper always got stuck in your mouth. Red Hots, Mary Janes, jujubes that threatened your fillings. Dozens of jars with treats to tempt you. In the evening or on weekends, you could find us in our bedrooms, playing with erector sets, Lionel trains, slinkies, Lincoln Logs, reading our Superman or Archie's comic books, and trading baseball cards. Wish I still had mine. The girls sticking paper clothes with little tabs on paper dolls. In more quiet moments, the guys might be reading the Hardy Boys, or the girls Nancy Drew, or listening to the radio, The Lone Ranger, Make-Believe Ballroom, Inner Sanctum and its scary creaking door, Green Hornet, Jack Armstrong, Fibber McGee and Molly, The Shadow, Walter Winchell, Good Evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, Amos and Andy, Arthur Godfrey, Baby Snooks, Jack Benny, the FBI in Peace and War, and a host of other programs.
There was no FM. Everything was AM stations. You went under the subway station, you lost your radio. It cut out.
You could find us in the living room of the lucky family that happened to have a television set, inviting us into their homes to share the wonder of Milton Berle's Texaco Star Theater, the Goldbergs, I Love Lucy, Father Knows Best, Sid Caesar's Show of Shows, Jackie Gleason's Honeymooners, Ed Sullivan, Leave It to Beaver, Your Hit Parade, Paladin, Zorro, The Twilight Zone, Kukla, Fran and Ollie, and the Mickey Mouse Club, along with Ozzie and Harriet.
There used to be one TV in the building. You know, Louis Castaldi. Yeah, Grandma's house, and my mother's building was Louis Castaldi's.
The night we finally got one, we got a little Admiral, and it was in a wooden cabinet, and I think I got sick that night. I was so excited.
One television program in particular had a profound influence and became a mirror of our adolescent lives, and that was American Bandstand. Hosted by Dick Clark, it debuted in 1958 and showcased our dances, the stroll, the twist, the monkey, the Lindy, and the bop, and our music, the emerging legendary rock and roll.
I took dancing lessons in school, Christopher Columbus in '89. Mr. O'Connor used to teach us all how to dance.
Dancing Latin at the Hunts Point Palace. That's where I learned to dance.
An important offshoot of this music, DooWop, was also gaining a foothold. Loads of harmony and simple lyrics mixed with nonsense syllables, and a toe-tapping beat characterized this new sound. We claimed it as our music, the sound of the Bronx.
I remember sitting out on the fire escape at night, listening to the guys DooWop on the corner.
The Penguins came out with Earth Angel. Wow. They asked me to leave the candy store because we played it so much. They said, if you play the song one more time, you're going to have to leave.
The echo effect of the bathroom was what attracted us to singing there. The stench was unbelievable, but we sounded like we were singing in a recording studio. When we sang in the toilet, we sounded like we were singing in a recording studio.
They used to also go to Fordham Road, the D train. Because when you go down the subway, it would almost work like an echo chamber. And it was wonderful for the sound of the music. And that's where they harmonized.
Practiced in the subways, in lobbies and in halls, even in the doorway singing doo-wop to the wall.
You couldn't afford instruments. By that I mean if you were doing a bass and you thought you were playing a string bass, you were dum 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 dum, and people would look at you and say, "You're playing an instrument." No, I'm not. That's all voice.
We bought the records, played the jukeboxes, and listened to the radio DJs like Jocko, Oop Papa Doo, and How Do You Do, Great Googa Mooga, and Alan Freed.
Now, well, I love the girl, and the Ruby is her name. Ruby. Hear me talking now. This girl.
Dion and the Belmonts, living in the Little Italy section of the Bronx, practiced a cappella on 187th Street and fashioned their music from the streets of the Bronx before attaining fame as the premier 50s and 60s singing group.
I was walking in Pelham Bay in the Bronx, and I was walking by a synagogue, and I heard this ethereal music coming out, you know, like, you know, it was very minor and very haunting. So I went in, I'm listening, and I started talking to Rabbi Rosenblatt, Henry Rosenblatt, who was the cantor in the synagogue there, and I was asking him about the music. Well, what is that? And he took me in the back and played me some records, 33s that were reissued of his father Joseph, Rosenblatt, who was in the original Jazz Singer with Al Jolson. And he's a famous rabbi. And, you know, this guy taught me how to, because I was singing, I was trying to do it, and he told me I was singing wrong, and I think if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have a voice today. So I often joke about it and say it was Jewish rock and roll or fusion, you know, back then.
You could hear their music from our fire escapes and even from our apartment building rooftops, where we reclined under the lines of freshly laundered garments flapping from wooden clothespins as we happily sweltered on our nearly private and sometimes bubbling tar beach.
Can you imagine on a hot day going up on the roof of a Bronx tenement building, 5 stories high, with tar that actually started to melt, and you'd put down a towel or something to lie down there and get a sunburn?
But the best place to find us was the Stoop, where we talked, where we planned and shared. For us, it was the family room, and all were welcome.
Most of all.
Dinner's ready, she would call out from the window. Dinner's ready, and we'd have to come home for dinner.
In the Bronx, we were all part of some group, some block, some club or other.
3 o'clock in the morning, where's Mom?
Johnny pump was open.
And the fire hydrant would be open. And you see the water.
Hydrant was
get dressed and run down. All the ladies would be with their feet in the water, drinking lemonade. There'd be a guy cooking sausage. 3 o'clock in the morning, everybody's out in the street. And what the heck are we doing up in bed, you know?
Despite the different neighborhoods and the diversity of people, talk to anyone born or raised in the Bronx today, and most of their memories, experiences, and attitudes will be curiously similar. The Bronx managed to achieve a style, a personality so unique and so distinctive as to unite its neighborhoods into a common culture.
Bronx had more of a feeling that all your neighbors were of a melting pot together.
It's got everybody. Tough people, very resilient people, people who come here looking for a better life. And that story hasn't changed over 150 years.
We are a mainland people, unlike Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, Manhattan, island people.
And I'm proud of that neighborhood. I'm proud of where I'm from. I'm proud of all those people there. And that's why I go back there all the time.
I'll always stay in the Bronx because everything is here. It's the whole world is right in the borough of the Bronx.
I love the Bronx. People always ask me, when I say I'm from the Bronx, they ask me, what part? I say, all of me.
I always go back there for a feeling of satisfaction, a feeling of love, and a feeling for being happy that I came out of that kind of environment.
And my wife says, you know, if I could find a decent apartment on Arthur Avenue, I'd move back in a minute. And she really would.
Every once in a while I drive to my block where I used to live, and I can almost name everybody in everybody's house that there was, you know. That's where Pete lived, that's where this, and I purposely do it, just to, you know, to bring back my memory.
Thank you, God. Thank you, God, for letting me be born and bred in the Bronx.
The Bronx. Some say you can't go home again. But isn't that what we just did? In our cherished memories, in the stories we tell our kids, in our joyous reunions, and in our hearts, we haven't really left. If people think the Bronx wasn't so classy, I dare them to name a better place to grow up, a better place than our neighborhoods that nurtured friendship, achievement, and humanity. I double dare them. As a matter of fact, I double dog dare them. And whether you were born or raised in the Bronx, if you call yourself a Bronxite, then you always have a seat on my stoop.
There are lots of old photos in this book. How great it is to take a look. Pictures to remember. Pictures to remember. Pictures to remember. If
mission. Here's you in the snow, so long ago, and here's one of me in love with you. Pictures to remember, pictures to remember, pictures to remember. Here's one of you by the lake, I keep for old time's sake. I really love the view. And here's one in spring, you were wearing my ring, and this one's of me in love with you. Pictures to remember, pictures to remember, pictures to remember. Love wasn't quite what we expected. Wow. At times it seemed so very strange. Wow. Of all the pictures we collected, there's only one that never changed. Here's one of you with a rose, striking a beautiful pose, the way you used to do.
Bom bom did it yep yep did it yep yep bom 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 dip 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 bom 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 dip 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 bom dip 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 bom bom bom
Goodbye, baby. It's time to leave. I sure wish I could stay. So please don't ever let me down. I love you, darling, with all my heart. Tell me that I love you, baby, with all my heart. So please don't ever let me know I love you, darling. I love you so. So please don't ever let me down. I love you, darling, with all my heart. Tell me that I love you, baby, with all my heart. So please don't ever let me know I love you, darling, with all my heart.
Sometimes when I'm all alone, feeling kind of low, you come back to cheer me up because you love me so.
Sometimes when I'm all alone, feeling kind of low, you come back to cheer me up, you know I'll be true, no matter what you do. Please, darling, say you love me too. Sometimes when we're on a date, myself behave. Your folks object if we're out late. I don't really care. I really want you for my wife. Truly need you all my life. Please, darling, don't leave me in despair. You know how I feel about you, darling. Darling, you're in every thought and every prayer. Don't you realize that I'm crazy over you? Why won't you leave me the way you can? Sometimes when I'm all alone, feeling kind of low, you come back to cheer me up because you love me so. You know I'll be true, no matter what you do. Please, darling, say you love me sometime.
Hit the penny with the Spalding. Play jacks, marbles, scully, flip cards, and pitch pennies. Take the 3rd Avenue L to the hub or go to detention. With every roll of the dice, you're back in the Bronx. You're looking at more than a board game. This is a trip, a first-class journey back to your childhood. Land on places that will jog your memory. Pitch pennies, flip bottle caps in Scully. Play jacks, make an egg cream, get sent to detention and lose a turn. You'll bounce an authentic and rare Spalding to hit the penny. Aim a marble for the hole. Trade cards. Comes with a 22-inch square game board. Over 50 images on the board and over 50 cards, including popular high schools, movie theaters, landmark buildings, and familiar Bronx locations. This beautiful board was designed and created by Bronx-born and bred Martin Tobias, whose artwork has been represented by numerous art dealers, publishers, and distributors, including Christie's of London. Begin the journey and the joy by getting this unique game that brings back the beauty that once was your Bronx. The Bronx, lost, found, and remembered 1935 through 1975. Let us take you back to the fabulous Bronx with a first-class tour of over 400 fantastic, never-before-seen pictures of the movies, apartments, schools, restaurants, and candy stores. This one-of-a-kind coffee table, 280-page, hardbound treasure is sure to delight you, a relative, or a friend. This truly is a gift that will keep on giving loads of pleasure. Back in the Bronx magazine. You came from a place that had its own community, its own village, its own special culture, a special country that happened to be called the Bronx. The Bronx was a good provider of friends, of fun, ideas, ideals, and value, and above all, of memories. And this is the only magazine that brings it all back. The magazine that refuses to allow all those great memories to die. Subscribe or renew today. After all, it's your life. Relive it with Back in the Bronx magazine. This video, A View from the Stoop, took you on an incredible journey of both sight and mind, of memories and places, wonders and aromas. They came from our transport tapes. The next stop, the Bronx. Many of those wonderful, rare, old-time film of vintage trains, trolleys, and buses that date back to the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Some, even in color, have been carefully preserved on videotape and are now available from these transport tapes. All the neighborhoods, all the routes, all the memories are gathered together for your viewing enjoyment. We even have 2 color tapes of Freedom Land that were gleaned from 16mm movies on a clear summer day in 1961. You may even see yourself or a friend wandering around the park. So look at the selections, choose your favorite transport tape routes, and hop on board. You are looking at a really beautiful piece of art. It's beautiful because it documents all of our lives with landmarks, institutions, and hangouts, the places that shaped our lives in the wonderful world of the Bronx. This 22-inch by 28-inch 4-color panorama of all those precious memories that are truly fit to be framed. Treat yourself to one and also order one for a friend or relative. We can even personalize this poster by having your favorite candy store's name included. Order now.
Bom 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 bom. I'm going to that mall shop in the sky. I'm going to the place where people never die, and where the soda fountain never will run dry.
When I first moved to Long Island years ago, and my kids were little, I used to yell at them to get out of the gutter, and my next door neighbor, who was from Massachusetts, said, "How could they get out of the gutter? Isn't that what's on your house?" And I said, "No, I come from the Bronx. The Bronx, we played in the gutter. We played punch ball in the gutter."
Like when I went to Alfred University, they talked like that. That was upstate there near Buffalo. You know, my father gave me $1 to get married. You know, and I go, "Hey, Bab. I don't know who they were talking to for Bab? Who's Bab? Oh, that's me. It's Bob. You know.
The Paradise. That's how we used to call it, the Paradise.
My friend Babes, his real name was Carmine. I didn't even know his name was Carmine until I was an adult. You know, I said, "Who's Carmine? Why are these people calling you Carmine?" He goes, "Well, that's my name." I said, "That's your name." You know, my friend Babes Prezioso and Tony Alley-Oop, Anthony Alley-Oop. We call him Alley-Oop because he was very big and he looked like Alley-Oop was like a caveman. So if you had a big nose, there was no Nicky Nose, and you know, some guys probably wouldn't want me to mention their names, I think, so I better be careful.
My mother used to say, "You want a sandwich." When I got older, I was still saying sandwich, and people didn't know what I was talking about, and I looked at them like, "Sandwich, a sandwich, what's the matter with you, a sandwich? What's the matter, you got an accent or something?"
On 167th Street, there was a trolley car that ran all the way to the East Bronx on one side and went all the way west to Manhattan on the other side. And that trolley car had the most characteristic sound, like ding, ding, you know, on the trolley car, and the stairs would come down the front, like, and you'd get up on the stairs, and the door would open, and then when they were ready to leave, the stairs would come up and the doors would go and close.
And we'd get on what was called the Morris Avenue trolley. It was not a big trolley, but a tiny one. And it went on Morris Avenue. We'd get off at 164th Street and then walk west to our house.
And the trolleys were somewhat antiquated. You know, they had the ads on the inside, and you pull the string. If you wanted to get off, they had a string, go, ding! It would knock you out of your seat if you wanted to get off. And sometimes you couldn't push your way out to get off the trolley. But the trolley stopped in the middle of the street. All the tracks are in the middle of the street. Now you might say, was this dangerous? I didn't think of it as being dangerous, but it was, because you got out of the rear or the front of the trolley, those doors and those steps that went down, and there could be cars going alongside the place that you get out of it. So you had to be real careful about it.
We used to have a joke, my sister and I and my father, had nothing to do, let's do something. Why don't you go watch the trains? Because the motormen would know, the engineers on the New York Central, going under Gun Hill Road like that, headed towards the next stop, which was Botanical Garden, they'd wave. They'd wave to the children.
My father would bring the newspapers home that he found on the subway. He'd come home with them under his arm. What do you have today? Well, I got the pink edition of the New York Daily News. You know, that was the Bulldog edition, the first one. And he'd always bring the newspaper home when I was sick, whatever, but he'd find them in the subway or in a trash barrel or something.
You didn't take buses and trains if you could walk because you wanted the money to buy food and treats and, you know, hot dogs or ice cream. And I carried it on the rest of my career, actually. I worked for a comedian named Joey Bishop, and he would call us and send us plane money to come to where he was, like in Chicago at the nightclub, and we would take the tickets in case you didn't take the bus. We would go on Greyhound. They finally called, Joey Bishop's the one who brought me to Hollywood. He called from Hollywood, he says, I'm bringing you out to work on my TV show with Danny Thomas, who's the producer, and I'm sending you the tickets. He says, now don't turn them in for those bus tickets. I heard you do that, because I need you right away. Get on the plane. No buses.
You would stand on the fender of the bus and hang on to the top part under the back window. And the people who were sitting in the back of the bus would go like this, "Get out of here, you bad kids, get out of here, get out of here. You're gonna make this man have an accident," you know, stuff like that. And we sort of laughed at them because you never took the bus for more than maybe a half a block. You know, the distance that you'd have to go on a bus sometimes is intolerable. For instance, from Marcy Place to go to Orchard Beach, which we used to call Horseshit Beach. It took, I would say, about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and you could probably drive it now in maybe 30 minutes, 20 minutes. It took you almost a half a day to get there.
Growing up in the Bronx, I had three choices: the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Giants. And being a New Yorker and from the Bronx, I was a Yankee fan. I rooted for them all growing up.
When you come through that chute and see that green, I was not used to manicured lawns.
I used to join the crowds from different churches and PAL to get in for nothing when we were a kid.
Even if you paid. I went to 2 World Series where I slept overnight on the cement at Yankee Stadium. I remember the Phillies, 1950. We slept all night on the cement to get into the bleachers and see the World Series game with the Philadelphia Phillies.
Well, Yankee Stadium, to go to those games, my uncle, my father was in the Marine Corps, was in the 40s, World War II was on. He took me to a World Series game, St. Louis Cardinals, New York Yankees, Yankees outfield, Tommy Henrich, Joe DiMaggio, King Kong Keller, Cardinals outfield, Enos Slaughter, Terry Moore, Stan Musial. I mean, great players, great teams. I think the Yankees won that game, but I stood in on the last row in the bleachers, back against the wall of the bleachers, in right center field.
My father used to take me to Yankee Stadium. We'd give the guy at the gate, my father would give him $1 extra sometimes to give us good seats, because in those days, Yankee Stadium was built where they had the posts, and if you didn't give a guy a half $1 or $1 more, they'd put you behind those posts, and you couldn't see the game.
So I took the train up to the stadium, went up to George Steinbrenner, lets me use his box. So I'm in there, there's one guy in there. And I looked, and it's Joe DiMaggio. God, Joe DiMaggio, the most private, the greatest Yankee of them all. And here I am alone with him. But you know, you don't bother Joe DiMaggio. You don't tell him, I know Ivan Evangelista. It don't mean anything to Joe. So I sit down, and he looks over, he sees me, he says, how'd you get here so quick? I figured he knows I'm on a morning show, and I said I took the train up. Oh, good, that's good, you got here in a hurry. That's all I had to hear. I got up, sat right down next to Joe, and had Joe DiMaggio for 20 uninterrupted minutes, telling him, King Kong Keller, you, Joe, Tommy Henrich, first game, right up there, Joe, right against that the bleachers wall, the last row in the stadium, and had a wonderful conversation with him about those great teams and Yankees and the Bronx in general.
I remember sitting on the subway alongside some of the Yankee stars whose names evade me at this moment, but in those days before armored cars and security guards and lawyers and accountants and business managers, they would mingle with the ordinary public.
Coming back to the Yankee Stadium, you know, you get goose pimples a little bit. I remember getting off the team bus, going into the locker room, and there were a lot of firemen and policemen there, and they started hollering to me, "Hey, Donovan, I hope you're better than when you were at Mount St. Michael's." I says, "I don't know."
And of course, I happened to be born into an era when the Yankees never lost. They lost in '55. Elston Howard grounded out to, I think, Jim Gilliam. And the Yankees finally lost to the Dodgers. And I was really depressed. And my sister was a little tactless. They lost the World Series. They lost the World. You know. And your parents get so cranky when you try to kill your sister by choking. I mean, they just, you know, the thumbprints are still there. She's 64 years old.
The things I remember about it was anytime you needed 14 friends in a hurry, all you did was go out in the hallway and whistle, and you had a baseball team.
I had 10 friends in my building alone, not to mention across the street.
I grew up on 187th Street. In fact, the building I was born in is still there. The 751 East 187th. And I still have a picture of me and a little horse. He used to bring little ponies around in those days.
The areas that I lived in was Wilkins Avenue, Boston Road, Stebbins Avenue, Bristow Street, Fox Street, Southern Boulevard, Charlotte Street. In those days, I was, of course, very young, and we were very poor. We didn't have a father home. So we were people that very late at night, we would move out of one apartment building and get into another, and we were able to skip the rent for at least a week or so. We always delayed paying.
My building was right on the corner there, 187th and Camberling. I lived right on top of Lizzie's drugstore when I was a kid. I remember there was Nat's toy store across the street. It was right in the Five Corners, you know, Bishop Perricone. And that's when the stand used to be set up there, and these people singing, and I would open my window, and I had the best seat in the house.
And I remember there was a man came in our backyard at least once a week with his monkey, and he would sing. He was like the street singer with the megaphone, and he'd yell up through the windows. Everybody would throw him out a penny. One day somebody threw him a nickel. I think he retired that time.
I lived on the top floor, so I became the fastest runner in my class in the school.
Yeah, he was.
32, I was the fastest runner in the school. Because I ran up the five flights 100 times a day.
You'd hear people in the streets in the summertime. They'd sit in front of their buildings and eat and talk and read the newspapers before it got dark. The kids would hang around there and play ball. There was always noise in that neighborhood, or people who wouldn't come down, who'd stick their heads out of the window, and they go, "Dottie, what did you say about that?" You could hear them all the way up the block.
And also I had the opportunity to go back to the Bronx and do a motion picture with Paul Newman. And the picture, of course, was Fort Apache, the Bronx, which was the 4-1 precinct on Simpson Street, which is an area where I lived as well. And there was a scene in that particular picture where I threw someone off a roof. And I lived in the building.
Sleep on a fire escape.
Sleep on a fire escape in the summertime because it was too hot. There was no air conditioning at the time, so we used to go out on a fire escape to sleep.
We used to put a fan on one end of the house and put another fan on the other end of the house. And we'd open the windows, and the one fan in the front would blow one way and the other one would take it out the back, you know.
The kitchen was minuscule. The kitchen was like the inside of a closet. And that's where most of the activity took place. There was a table there and chairs, and people would come in from all over the building. They'd talk to my mother. They'd schmooze in either Yiddish or Russian or Polish.
I never had my own room, actually. I shared a little contrived dinette bedroom with my sister until she became a teenager. I'm 4.5 years younger. It was unseemly. So I had a Castro in the living room, and it was an ottoman-sized. Ottoman is supposed to be a footrest. My bed was a footrest. And one time my sister said something so clever. She said, "Shut up and get on your room." You know.
Say I'm from the Bronx. They say, "Oh, what part?" I say Riverdale. They say, "That's not the Bronx." And it's as if people are saying, that this borough doesn't deserve the upper class neighborhoods like Fieldston and Wave Hill along the Hudson. Like, there's something about the Bronx that it shouldn't have those. That's not. Well, that's as much the Bronx as any place else, and I've never quite understood that sort of reflex association. You say Bronx, they say where, you say Riverdale, they say that's not the Bronx. I mean, I came from the blue collar, if you want to call it that section, near Van Cortlandt Park, but I've never understood that.
Every Easter, I used to get a new Easter suit, and I would be very, new spring suit, and I would be very, very disappointed if Easter Sunday were 1, too cold, 2, snowy, rainy, whatever it was, that I couldn't wear my Easter suit.
I mean, my mother had 7 kids. We spent hours and days in Alexander's. I got lost in Alexander's department store, as I thought if I stood in front of the Barbie doll long enough that my mother would buy it for me. But there were so many kids that she didn't realize I was still standing there, and I got lost and I got in trouble then.
My brother and I would go to buy Hanukkah presents at Alexander's, and then when we'd buy presents for each other, we'd split up because we wouldn't want to tell each other what we were buying for each other. And then invariably we'd bang into each other in the record department.
Spent a lot of time in Fordham, too. They had all the stores, DeViga, Vim's. You could buy records there. Baseball gloves.
Hijinks, which was everyone's favorite store on Jerome Avenue. It was the sporting goods store, and that's where you got your Clinton jacket, and that's where you got your baseball glove and your bat.
We always went shopping for clothes at the cheapest place we could find. When I was young, when I was 11, 12 years old, I had one pair of pants. I couldn't afford any more. I had one pair of shoes.
You could live in the Bronx without buying any clothes. Nothing. Shoes, socks, underwear. Everything was passed down. The neighbor would have a son who was your size. The kid now was 10 years older than you were. The mothers saved all the clothes. They'd save everything. Baby carriages. Anything that could be recycled would be saved. I always got hand-me-downs, either from my cousin Irving or my cousin Milty or from Bobby or from God knows what. So I was always wearing someone else's socks that hadn't been worn out or somebody else's suits. After graduation from public school, suits or pants or jeans or whatever it was. I never had my own real clothes until after my bar mitzvah. And the reason I had them is because I had some money that I made, so I'd find a t-shirt or I'd find something that I'd like to wear.
There were cheese boxes those days, and we used to get the ends of these boxes and use for hockey pucks.
I played hockey, roller hockey, and my mother made me Life magazines. She wrapped them around my legs as shin guards. We didn't have any equipment, but she had managed to take Life magazines, which were thick, and put it on my shin guards.
Football game was not with a football. Sometimes it was a rolled up newspapers with tape wrapped around it. If you had a real football, you were the captain of the team.
I'd get the cheese boxes out of the trash at the markets, and I'd go and find some dirt on the lot. I'd go and get the dirt on the lot, and I'd get these seeds, and I'd plant the seeds and put these boxes, these cheese boxes with seeds, on the fire escape. And I never grew any vegetables that were worth anything, but I had little cherry tomatoes, and everyone would go, "Oh, look, David's a farmer. Look what he's growing."
To get to Fordham Road, for instance, usually would be 15 cents, and we had a choice. You can use that to get there, and another 15 cents to come back, or get a frankfurter with mustard and sauerkraut and a Coke. And oftentimes we'd walk to 20 or 30 blocks so that we could indulge in a frankfurter with mustard and sauerkraut, or a ice cream, soda, or any treat that we wanted.
The code of conduct was quite strict. We wore ties every day. Boys, girls wore dresses with bows in the back.
We used to have a teacher who used to give us the knuckle, a gym teacher. We misbehaved, just give the knuckle over the head, and we'd get right into place.
I was the captain of the monitors in the school. Now, you probably don't know what the monitors were. The monitors were like the cops. They were at the corners, getting kids going across the streets, or they were on the stairways, you know, guarding people going up?
We were given dog tags, which we were told rather tactlessly when the teacher could withstand 10,000 degrees centigrade, you know. Said your name and address and your religion. My Heb, I swear it said H-E-B, H-E-B, Heb.
Everybody cracked their gum. And even in the hallways, I remember we used to take it, chew it, and then put it under the desk. If you remember, I'm sure that when you sat down, by the time all your clothes had other people's gum all over it.
I rode to high school every day on a bicycle up the long hill leading to Boston Road. From the West Bronx, I went to the East Bronx, up the hill, parked the bicycle in the basement of Morris High School, and went to class.
I remember being in kindergarten and having one line in a little play, and it was, "I am Patrick Potato, this is my cousin, Mrs. Tomato," and I heard laughter in the room, and that was the bug that bit me.
I remember we played Mount St. Michael, you know, and there was a fight. Now here, all the priests are there and everything, and unfortunately the fight was started by a guy named Slimowitz, who was of Jewish faith, but we didn't want to get into that, so we made believe that a guy named McCaldy started the fight. We didn't want to say which Slimowitz started the fight. We'll be here all night fighting.
There were certain eccentric teachers. Doc Storch, who got away for years, a chemistry professor, teacher, wore a lab coat, little old man. Towards the end of the class, he would pretend he was a shooting gallery target. All right, boys, I'm building for that dream house. He'd take out a cigar box that had a lot of coins in it, and he would go back and forth like a bear in the shooting gallery, and you threw coins at him, and he picked them up and collected them.
Betting was what kept Clinton from punching each other all the time, because they bet on everything. I bet 4 kids here have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Who wants to take it? I'll bet. It's a bet.
I was poorly prepared. When I went to Alfred University, co-ed, I hadn't had a woman in the classroom in 3 years, you know, and I mean, any leg without hair on it, I couldn't stop staring at, you know.
I went out and I bought some Rit dye and replaced the water with Rit dye, so when she was doing the science class in the afternoon, she has her arms in the water showing how these caissons work, and her arms were as red as you could possibly see, and it took her weeks to get rid of that color on her arms. It was hysterical. She had to wear long sleeves all the time.
Yeah, I won the Celebrity Jeopardy prize, which was $50,000. I won it by $1 over Carson Kressley. The end of the game, you know, you get a chance to bet some of your earnings, and then whoever winds up with the most earnings and answers the question correctly is the winner. And so he bet, for some reason, $999, and not knowing what his score was, I bet $1,000, and I won by $1. And so Cardinal Hayes won the $50,000. Now let me tell you what else I'm doing. I'm going on a show later this month called "Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?" And whatever I win, I'm going to donate to Cardinal Hayes, but it could be $1 million. I mean, if I could remember what I learned in the 5th grade at A Lady of Solace, I'll be a lock, but I don't know. I watched the show. Didn't know that 5th graders were that advanced these days. But it's going to be fun. I'll do my best.
Senora Moscoso was a very dignified woman who was not a widow, but wore black in any event. Anyway, boys sometimes would play a trick and they'd purposely drop something, and Mrs. Moscoso was a matronly 55-year-old with a big bosom and a low-cut dress, and they'd drop something, and so she'd bend over, and it took a while for her to figure out they were trying to see her breasts. And finally she says, "You fellows, you pigs, you want to see my breasts?" You know. I had to change my pants when I got home from school, put on my dungarees, that's an old word, go downstairs, play curveball, stickball, a box baseball, shooting tickets, what we call tickets, baseball cards, Wild West cards.
The milk box had 9 separate compartments, 3 in the bottom, 3 in the middle, and 3 on top. and we'd put it against the wall and we'd get a Spalding, the old Spalding, bounce the ball, and if it landed in the thing, it was a single. If it bounced out, it was out. It was a way to play baseball.
Well, you'd either go to the St. Raymond Schoolyard, or you'd go to the handball courts in Parkchester in the North Quadrant, where there were, of course, the inevitable strike zones painted on the handball court, and you'd play strikes.
The school had a brick wall, and somebody had painted a strike zone on the wall. So we had this strike zone on the wall at 81. And we used to play there a lot, and of course it was a nice flat surface. When we couldn't play there, we'd go over to St. Margaret's, but St. Margaret's was one of those old stone buildings. So the stones, of course, had jagged edges. You had to swing at every pitch, or you had to go chase the ball, because when it bounced along the wall, it went this way, it went that way.
And these women would sit out there with their folding chairs and carriages, play someplace else, you know.
There was the PAL. You went, the cops said, you're going to get into trouble? No, okay, here's a bat and a ball. That was it. They didn't come to the games, the cops. They gave you a bat and a ball if you didn't rob somebody that week.
It snowed much more frequently then, and accumulations were much more frequent. And I lived on a gigantic hill, and it was my dream to have a sledding thing that would last like 2 and 3 minutes. These lasted a few seconds.
I used to say I was so poor when in the winter I didn't have a sled to go sleigh running. I didn't have a sled. I used to slide down the hill on my cousin. She wasn't bad. That was the big joke of the day.
And we had 22 kids of my age. We probably were about 10 years old, and we played a game of tackle football in the middle of the street.
Cut out to the Buick, make a quick cut at the Studebaker, go straight out to the Ford Woody.
We had Mr. Machine, which was like this robot that was, I don't know what to say about it. I have a feeling we broke it soon after we got it, so I don't know how long it lasted. We played electric baseball, which was just the stupidest game when you think about it.
I used to love the radio shows. Jack Armstrong, the All American Boy, Bobby Breen, Tom Mix, Dick Tracy, Superman. And my mother, about 5 o'clock, the radio serials go on, and she'd bring my meals to me, like a king.
When television first came out, my neighbor, her son was into electronics, and they had this tube that we watched with all the batteries and things, all the Hoosies, and we every evening they would have. You think it sounds silly now, but everybody in the building practically went next door to watch this television.
But the Paradise Theater, I also did, remember a show I did with Alan Freed and Chuck Berry. I was just starting out. I had recorded I Wonder Why, and they had a presentation of Rock Around the Clock after it was out for a while. And Alan Freed and Chuck Berry had come up to the theater, and that was live, right in the Paradise.
The only thing sexual I ever saw was Elvis Presley when I was a teenager, and they set me up to my room because he wiggled. Remember when he was on the Ed Sullivan Show? I got hysterical crying so much that they finally called me down because they showed him from the waist up.
My dad was very sympathetic to my ambitions, so he rigged a microphone in the bathroom and this long cord, electrical cord, into the family radio so that I had imaginary football games, imaginary baseball games that I could broadcast from the bathroom.
DC Comics, Superman, Batman, 10 cents a copy, mortified when it went up to 12 cents, unbelievable that it went up to 15 cents.
My aunt had a candy store on Tremont Avenue when we go over there, which was a big treat. I would sit in the corner and read Tales from the Crypt, comic books. So the rotting flesh, disgusting thing. From then on, I came home from school and my mother put down a salami sandwich. Like it's a dead body.
We played electric football, which was, it was just this magnetic board, and you put all the football players, and, and all the players move around. And it had, I think, this little foam ball that was probably about that big.
We went to a theater called the Zenith Theater, and the Zenith Theater played a double feature Yiddish movie. And the reason my mother took me to the theater was because when you have 2 admissions, you get 2 plates or 2 forks or somebody else from a part of, she'd go there to get the dishes. And I'd sit there and I'd watch Moshe Oisha, the singing rabbi, or Jaime and the Meshuggahs, which was some comedian who went to the crazy house, and some of these very deep, old, Yiddish movies. And she would go home with dishes and silverware, and she was the happiest person in the world to do that.
There was an old-time theater called the Windsor Theater. I was never there. My older brother said he saw the Three Stooges live there. It's on Kingsbridge Road as you turn up to go toward Poe Park.
The matrons used to always be telling us to shut up, and we used to throw things, popcorn at her and candy bars. And I remember one time I went to see The Tingler, that Vincent Price movie. I think it's from 57, 56, something like that. And they had little buzz things underneath the seats, so that when that little shock thing came on the screen, you get a little psst underneath your screen, and we were all screaming. It was great.
One of the first comedians to come in to the Improv in New York was Adam Keefe. Remember him? Brilliant guy. And all of a sudden he's doing his routine, and he mentions, I think it was maybe it was the Luxor Theater? Luxor Theater. And I went, oh my God. And then we started talking, and we're from the same neighborhood.
Paradise Theater was when you had a sort of a major date or someone you really wanted to impress. You'd get on the bus, Pelham Parkway, and White Plains Road, and ride the bus into Fordham, and then get off right on the Grand Concourse and walk a block or so. And the Paradise Theater was really heaven on earth, Stars were in the ceiling, and it was just so beautifully done inside. In those days, they really built movie theaters.
We always sat in the balcony. When we sat in the balcony, we would look at they had stars. The stars would twinkle, and they also had clouds. The clouds that actually moved through the stars. It was quite beautiful.
My first date with my wife, Susan, 52 years ago, the Paradise was, top shelf. It was like, that's where you went, We sat way high up in the balcony, and I was trying to get close to her any way I could. And, with the arm, and my first kiss, and we're still together after all these years.
And the movie theaters were jammed, absolutely jammed, and kids would do nothing but eat, talk, and watch the movie. That's why today you never want to go to the movie with a kid from the Bronx, because they still talk through the whole movie.
The Whitestone Drive-In was the first time I ever went to a drive-in, and my husband at that time had a I think it was a 68 Catalina, Pontiac Catalina, and it was quite big, so you got to see the movie somewhat.
Some of the real guys, like I said, Eddie Mush was really Eddie Mush in the movie. That was Eddie Mush. I mean, we tried to cast him, and I remember Robert De Niro said, how we're going to get somebody, because I explained to him what Eddie Mush was like, and we just couldn't find anybody. So he goes, where's the real Eddie Mush? So I said, well, he's in the neighborhood. So he says, well, really? He says, let's go up there and see him, So we got in a car, we went up to the neighborhood, and I said, well, if he's anywhere, he's probably at OTB. And there he was, right in front of OTB, cursing at people and yelling. And I got out of the limo, and I walked over to him, and I said, Eddie, he goes, hey, how you doing? He goes, hey, I hear you making a movie about the neighborhood. I said, yeah. I says, listen, Robert De Niro wants to talk to you. He goes, what? He goes, get the hell out of here. You're full of shit. I says, no. He's in the car. He goes, I go, come over to the car. He goes, I ain't going over to no car. I owe too many people money. I said, he thought I was like setting him up or something. I said, will you come over to the car? He's really in the car. And he said, all right. I had to finally drag him over to the car, and the window goes down, and Bob looks at him, and he looks at Bob, and he goes, holy shit, it is you. And my friend Dave Salerno, he played Frankie Coffee Cake. But the funniest thing was, I was an actor, I was studying to be an actor all my life, and I would do anything for a part. And here it is, and I remember De Niro saying to Dave, he said, listen, I want you to come and read a few lines. Could you come Tuesday at 1 o'clock? And Dave said, 1 o'clock? Can I come at 3? I just want to make the double at Aqueduct. And Bob said, yeah, okay. I mean, it was like, these guys were like incredible, man, you know. We did the crap game scene in Bronx Tale. Those were really all street guys. And it was really funny because Robert De Niro wanted, Bob, you know the way, everybody knows the way Bob is, he wanted to use real money. We usually use fake money. So we had $5,000 of the studio money to use. So we did it the first day with using the real money. And at the end of the day, the prop guy walks over to us and says, look, you know, we're 1,200 short. So we said, oh, Jesus God. So the next day we get there again and we tell the guys, we go, hey, you know, we're $1,200 short. We can't do, well, I don't know how that happened, not me, oh, not me. So we film again with the real money and $700 short the next day. So the prop guy goes, look, we're another $700. So the next day we come up and we go, look, Bob says, I'm going to stop this thing. I'm going to have to get all new people, which we couldn't do. It was too late. He was lying because we were shooting. We already had them on film. But we got to have the money back by the end of the day. So I don't know what you do. So we filmed again, and we had all the money back by the end of the day.
Every neighborhood had their own candy stores, and ours was Freddy's on 165th Street and Teller Avenue.
2 blocks away, there was Artie's Luncheonette, and everybody used to cut out of school and go over to Artie's Luncheonette.
On Bury Avenue, on one side of the street, we had Flo's Candy Store, but on the other side, we had Katz's Candy Store, where the few Jewish people of the neighborhood hung out, and he made great egg creams, though.
They would go, you know, we'll meet you at Louis the Jew, which was the candy store. Louis was a sweet man, a really great guy, and he used to let us read the comic books and not get mad at us, so I liked him a lot.
You'd stop at the delicatessen and you have a knish or a hot dog on the way home getting onto the train.
Went to Howard Johnson's and I loved the hot dogs. The hot dogs were the greatest. In those days, they were the best. On a toasted bun with mustard and relish. Fabulous. Fabulous.
I love the Mellow Rolls, and that was a kind of a funny ice cream because it wasn't traditionally what you would see today as a scoop, but it was almost like a cylinder, and it fit into a cylinder type of a cone. And I used to love the Mellow Roll. You would peel off, actually, a piece of paper from the Mellow Roll and then put the ice cream into the cone.
The great attraction in the fall was to go in there, and for 2 cents, you could get a piece of halava that was really delicious. In the cold weather, I used to love that. And then they had they introduced chocolate-covered halava, and that was better than anything.
And lime Rickies was really big. Sometimes there were raspberry lime Rickies, but it was mostly just lime Rickies, and we kind of felt like we were big shots drinking lime Rickies.
A penny would be enough money to have the dealer in the candy store walk with you for 20 minutes while you decided how to spend that penny. He'd walk with you up and down the aisle, helping you to choose, making suggestions. He would say, Joey, here's something good, here's something good, and he would make you an accumulation of different items, and at the end, you give him the penny, and he was so thrilled. A quarter, that was gigantic money. I mean, nobody had a quarter.
And back in the 50s, it was $6.25. There's still one Jan's ice cream parlor remaining in Hillside, and the kitchen sink today is $38.65.
Now, that was a serious day. Right after the movies, you go to Jan's, have a huge sundae.
Back in the 1950s, you could actually buy a real kitchen sink that you put in the kitchen for $38.65.
If a guy was doing well and he ordered an ice cream soda, you know, for 35 cents, he was doing great. You know, he was in big time, you know.
Ben Weber's Pickle Store. They had the best sour pickles you could ever find anywhere. For my whole life, I've been searching for a Ben Weber pickle, and you can't find a Ben Weber pickle, which is one made in brine that the guy made by himself in these big barrels, and he used to have the nickel pickle. The nickel pickle was almost looked like a burrito, it was so big.
There was the Laurels and the Deuces Wild, which was in the Bronx Tale. Deuces Wild was a Bronx tale, and actually that was the name of our club, the Deuces Wild and the Laurels, which was great. So, they still have social clubs back there now. You know, we would paint the windows black and put a name on it.
And everybody hung out at Schweller's restaurant. There was also Katz's Delicatessen. Some went to Katz's, but Schweller's is where you really had your first beer, because sometimes you could get served before you were 21.
Yeah, I was with a band in the 70s called Razumachaz, which was my band, and I appeared all over the Golden Hour and My Way and Fantasy East and a lot of those on Pelham Parkway, yeah, a lot of those places there. We used to have a big following, and it was fun. It's a fun time for me. Maxim's on Jerome, it's great. Office Lounge. I think that's where I started.
I remember Tony Rhoda. Rhoda's on a Friday night. There were more guns in there than there were in Fort Knox, because Tony Rhoda used to cash the cops' checks, and they would all show up there on a Friday night. And I remember one time some poor soul from the mental hospital down near Jacoby there wandered in, apparently escaped and wandered into Rhoda's and started creating a disruption, and found 40 guns staring at him.
Back then, everybody would have those wooden folding chairs, and we would all hang out outside, and my parents would hang outside, and people would sit outside, and there was always like the neighborhood. There was Min and Gil and Mary Lou and all these people that would constantly always be outside.
You know what Morte is? Morte is Italian number game.
And you play,
you play by just throwing out
it's like
fingers,
like rock, paper,
and
scissors.
calling it
But you gotta
the
anticipate.
addition of all the fingers out in an Italian number. If it's six,
you got to anticipate what the number's
three
going
and
to be.
three, you would say sei. Sei is
six.
six. If you got six,
and you
won
win the point.
You win whatever points you're playing
And you
for.
play for cigars, and that's what all the men in the neighborhood did every night. Everybody hung out in front
You
of the
heard
candy
that
store.
Morte game
From
going
screaming
on.
Out, all you heard was "Say Otto." And
We were such good kids. It was a much more innocent time. There were so-called rocks. We never heard the word greasers. Rocks. Peg pants, duck's ass haircuts. The Fordham Baldies. The Baldies are coming, you know, they were this kind of juvenile, delinquent, rock around the clock.
When I saw them, they weren't bald. I think that was a misconception. I think there was the initiation was you shaved their head, but then you let it grow. You know, they didn't stay with, keep all their head shaves, no. But I remember some of them who I knew were baldies, were tough guys. Wow, yeah.
if I ever came home with a jacket, you know, with a baldy jacket, his father would have killed me. I mean, you know, all
My mother, my father, you could never even wear dark glasses when we were kids because they were afraid.
They were all friends of ours.
Trying to hide your eyes. What are you hiding your eyes? You're about smacking the head. You never wear glasses.
You went north of 166th Street, and if you weren't by yourself, you had a problem. And it wasn't gangs or anything like that. It just they didn't like you.
If you had an argument with somebody that was a fist fight, two things happened, or one or two things. You became very best friends after that, or if you walked down the street and you saw each other, one guy across the street went to the other side of the street and you just avoided each other forever.
You know, they carried zip guns and garrison belts because we were always fighting with other neighborhoods.
My neighborhood in Bronx, there were like 4 things that were respected. We play ball, you could punch somebody if you dressed well, because you got the girls, but I wasn't good at any of those 3. The 4th thing they respected was if you were funny. So I took the funny road.
I remember dropping a guy one time at a dance because he called me a dirty Mick, even though he was Italian and I was Italian. But it didn't make any difference because he would have called me whatever he wanted to call me. It just happened that I looked Irish.
My mother wouldn't allow me to go out with a boy unless he picked me up, and this fella, Peter Cavella from West Palm Square, said I can't come into the turf on Bury Avenue. So he came with a sweatshirt hooded up and the dungaree jacket, and he sneaked back to the Bury Avenue subway station to get out of the neighborhood.
Ragusa family, there was one of the Ragusas could take a rope and tie it to an ice truck and put the rope in his mouth and pull it. This was called entertainment in the Bronx. And these, let's go, he's going to pull the ice truck with his teeth. Let's all gather around, and you went, you Got a little bridge chair, you sat, you watched this.
Friday nights, we would take a little trip to Orchard Beach and steam up the car windows. Yeah, that was what we did. Definitely a very interesting place to go.
We also went to Jerome Cascade's pool till they told us that's where you catch polio. So suddenly it wasn't so popular.
When Jonas Salk's vaccine became available, I mean, that was marvelous. But you know what? It was all in stride. Rocket ships and jet airplanes. And I remember having an argument with my friend. Get out of here. There's no such thing as a plane without a propeller. He said, no, they're called jets. I said, get out of here. I was a little boy, you know. It was almost taken this, it was such a wonderful advance, and yet, well, we expect that, you know.
Bum 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 bum
Go up to a park, like Van Cortlandt Park, which was really a nice park. It had a lot of green area, and they had a little area we could rent boats. It was a joke also. This place was like a bathtub. You know, you rent a boat there. Where are you going to go to?
The Bronxdale swimming pool?
Well, tell me about it.
I should have told you that when you said, how did you keep cool? It was right across the street, gleaming white, you know, and a big, beautiful pool. And my God, it was so crowded. It was packed, but it was our way to escape. It was a big thrill. It was 35 cents to get into the pool for a day.
If you would give in your house key or some item of value, maybe a library card or something else, they would give you a game to play. And I remember always taking out either Chinese checkers and playing with my friends, or ping pong for the ping pong table that they had.
Where they have the tennis rackets now in Bronx Park, tennis courts. It was an ice skating rink. And went on that in the winter, of course, the ball fields in the summer, and football in the... We really used the park, and thank God there was a park there. You know, it kept us all out of trouble. We really got involved in our sports. It was, you know, a big deal for us.
When I moved out to Long Island as popularly known, I remembered I was only out there a short while, and I remember saying to my next door neighbor, we just moved out here from the Bronx, and I said, look at this, I already have flowers growing. I had a nice sea of yellow. Oh, was it beautiful? And I was so proud of it. Matter of fact, I was out there watering with the hose, and she said to me, Beverly, those are dandelions.
When you were a kid growing up in the Bronx, everyone has a job.
I delivered ice in the Bronx to apartment buildings where I had to walk up 4 floors with chunks of ice on my back.
The worst summer job in the world was carrying an 80-pound tank of orangeade through the sand at Orchard Beach. I did that for a year and a half. Let me tell you something. I used to come home, my shoulders bleeding from carrying that stuff. And you got a penny a cup. A penny a cup, and I used to make $30 a day. Can you imagine that?
I used to clean boilers. I worked for a guy who used to climb into boilers in people's homes and clean the long pipes that were in the boilers. I used to come home black from head to toe. I mean, with soot all over me, you know.
And the only way you actually made any money was they gave you 80 cups, and you had to bring back $8.
You beat them.
Yeah, well, you beat them because the thing held about 84 cups. If somebody wanted a refill, you were supposed to throw the cup away. What you did was you refilled the same cup. You kept the whole dime now. See, that's the only way you made any money.
My grandparents actually owned a fish store on White Place, inside a market where there were about 5 or 6 different stores.
My father was a bus driver, and I would sit behind him, and he would sometimes get me off the street. He says, "No, come on, ride with me," and I would ride with him. And
I also delivered the Bronx Home News. I don't know if anybody remembers that now, but it was an offshoot of the New York Post. And I'd come back from Hayes, I'd go to the store where all the papers were sitting in the bundle for each route, and I would go right up Kruger Avenue. I had my own street, right up Kruger, all the way to Bronx, to Pelham Parkway, around and down the side which faces Bronx Park, and served that for a year or two.
We had a tailor shop. The guy ran a dry cleaning store in his apartment. Can you imagine? Dry cleaning store in his apartment. And he had a reputation for touching the wrong parts of women when he was fixing their dresses. But I guess the women who wanted it would go in there all the time. And all the guys in the neighborhood would try to get peeks off the side of the building to see what was going on in the dressing room. Very interesting place.
And then I also had a route in the Bronx, inland, and one of my customers was Jake LaMotta. And Jake would be there in his underwear on a summer night, you know, playing stickball with the kids. Had a beautiful blonde wife, and he was the only one who gave me a tip. You know, he gave me a quarter tip, but I always remember him for that.
And as a shoe shine boy, I really got screwed because there was a guy who used to shine the cops' shoes on 170th Street, free. So when I came in as a kid, about age 10, with my little shoe shine box, I bought the polish and all the stuff at the local Woolworth store. You know, I spent about $3, which is a lot of money, to buy the brush and the stuff to clean the top of the shoes and the polish and the rags. And then I built this little shoe thing that you put your foot on, you know, like, didn't mean to scare you, but put your foot on so that the foot would stay steady, so you didn't shine the guy's socks. Well, this guy told the cops he didn't want me in the neighborhood. So one day, these guys from the 42nd or 44th precinct, I think it was up in High Bridge, they told me that I couldn't do this without a license. License? I'm 10 years old, what the hell do I know from a license? And they took my little shoe shine box and they put it on the corner. There was like sewers on the corners of the streets at 107th Street and Walton Avenue, right near the Barracini store where the candy was. You know, the candy stores used to have Barracini stores. And they kicked it into the sewer. I was so hurt and shattered, I didn't know what to do. So I went home and I told my father what the guy did, and he said, those cops have, why are they doing this to you? He says, you got to be smarter than they are. I said, what do I do, Dad? They took $3 of my money. So my dad very sweetly gave me the money to buy stuff for a new shine box. And he said, why don't you go down to Jerome Avenue, get to know the cop who's down there, and you shine his shoes for free. And that way, they won't kick your shoe shine box down the sewer, and it's out of this guy's territory.
All my friends are successful. A lot of my friends are all successful. You know, my friend Phil Folia, you know, is a lawyer. My friend Frank Oriema is, I think, a superintendent of schools. And even the guys who weren't even doctors or lawyers. And my friend Babes Prezioso did an incredible life for his family, worked 3 jobs. So all the guys that I grew up with really made something out of themselves, you know. And I'm very proud of all of them.
My grandmother had a grocery store, and she used to send us bread and some canned goods. My mother used to make lentil soup, and it was a delicacy for us. She'd take bread that was 2-3 days old, Italian bread, and put it in a bowl and heat up the lentils with hot water. And when it got to a point where the lentils were done, she would pour the lentils and the hot water over the Italian bread. And that was our meal, that was our dinner.
I mean, when you went into the apartment houses, you could just smell the Polish people with the kielbasa and the Italian people, they got the gravy going.
On Friday night, you smelled fademsta chicken, or roasted chicken, or other kinds of meats and things they're making for the Shabbos, which was early in the day they did it because they didn't obviously cook after dark. All the floors smelled differently. It always had this smell of fresh baked challah and cookies and cakes, and everyone ate. That's all they did was eat and talk.
My mother used to make the best sauce, the best brajol. Brajol is a rolled beef, you know, and she made the best meatballs, though. Her meatballs could float right out of here. They were that good.
And I remember my grandmother and my mom sending me to the store to get American bread. And when I got older, people said, what's American bread? I said, American bread. It's usually silver cup. They mean white bread? I says, yeah, American bread. Because it distinguished between that and Italian bread.
My mother used to fry the meatballs first, and then she'd put them in the gravy. So what I would do, while she was frying them, I'd go in and steal them out of the frying pan. And I would eat them before she put them in the gravy.
And there were 2 Chinese restaurants on 107th Street where we lived. And you'd walk in there, you saw everyone except the rabbi with his talis. His wife would be in there. Everyone would be eating this Chinese food. And my mother, who was the Rebbitzins' daughter, you know, she always said, well, I'm not eating anything that's not kosher. I thought to myself, Mom, the oil that they cook in it isn't kosher, and you're eating things on one plate with the same silverware. How could it, you know, but it wasn't dairy versus meat, but they loved the Chinese food so much that they would even put their religion on the line to eat it.
My grandfather, we moved to Pelham Parkway, Teeman area in the Bronx. He used to smoke a guinea stinker and had a parakeet. The bird used to land on the guinea stinker, and he used to blow what are those circles. One day the bird jumped on his glass and drank his wine and got drunk when he saved the bird. You know, like,
Grandma would always have a big Sunday dinner. It would be 20, 25 of us around a table eating. Families on
Bingo was big on the holidays.
Yeah, the holiday your father would call bingo.
My grandfather used to make wine in the basement, and when we were kids, he would buy a truckload of grapes, and him and my uncle would crush the grapes and make barrels of wine in the basement, and they lined them up in the basement.
My grandparents actually came over on the Mayflower. This is not well known. They had the buckled shoe concession on board. They saw a need. They went. You know, the line was gorgeous. They love buckles, these pilgrims.
Every morning, I would watch him walk up to Morris Avenue, where there was a liquor store, and he would carry down 4 gallons of Gallo, or whatever cheap wine he could buy, 2 in each shopping bag, and he would bring them into the basement and empty them into the old gallon jugs that he sold to his paisans. Those jugs, what was that stuff that we used to get to wash the clothes in the, what was it called? Clorox or something. They used to sell it door to door, right? And he used to save those bottles, and he would transfer the Gallo into these bottles and sell it to his paisans for $5 a gallon, and he paid $1 a gallon for it, and they loved it. Nothing like Miguel's wine. It's the best.
my father and mother didn't want me to talk Italian. And when I used to go visit my grandpa, I used to get very upset because I speak English to him. Because I used to go there and help him wash the steps and all. He got very angry.
My father whistled, everything stopped. You had to be there at that table.
My parents were my heroes, you know, they're great people, you know. I mean, they always tell me, what you've done for us the past 20 years, you know. And I go, whatever I've done, if it was another 100 years, I could never make up for what they did for me. A real part of Bronx Tale was my father wrote on this little index card, the saddest thing in life is wasted talent. And that really comes from, there was a fighter in the neighborhood named Billy Bello. And Billy Bello was a great fighter. 17 years old, he fought Gaspar Ortega for the, I think, the middleweight championship. I mean, incredible talent. And Bello died of an overdose of drugs. And they found him, I think, on a rooftop. And my father was he was devastated by that because he thought this kid had an incredible amount of talent. And when I remember him coming home, and I was a kid, and he told me this guy died, and and I think that's where that came from. About my father said he wasted all that talent, and he didn't want me, obviously, to fall prey to anything like that. So,
if some woman complained to my mother that I was fresh, or my father, say, my father was the fearsome one, you know, my mother, there would be no question. He would take her word at face value.
I was so sickly that they used to put my mother would put my clothes on the radiator when there was heat. So when I would get up out of bed in the morning, I had warm clothes to put on. But my sister Penny would sneak in and take the clothes and put it in the refrigerator and then put it back on the radiator. So I would get up, coughing, I would, to be frozen. And then she would get yelled at because we knew Penny did it. My sister Ronnie was a lovely girl.
I'm going to that malt shop in the sky. I'm going to the place where people never die, and where the soda fountain never will run dry. In that malt shop in the sky. I'm going where they play the jukebox all day long, and everybody's singing a brand new song. I guess I'm gonna make it my turn home. Yes, that mall shop in the sky, where there'll be lots of balls that all Lady of Bay. Yeah, the angels.
This is a quick shot of West Farm Square in the mid-1930s. Very bustling, busy area. This is Fordham Road looking west, and coming in from the right, the trolley making a turn is coming off Webster Avenue onto Fordham Road. Very busy intersection at this point, and this is again in the mid-1930s. It's a wonder they didn't get killed driving there. This looks like after a game at Yankee Stadium. They used to have the trolleys on 163rd Street. And it was very crowded at that point because everybody was in a rush to go home after the game. And you can see if they didn't get into one trolley, people would just go to the next one. And they were all filled up. Again, looks like it's the mid-1930s. Okay, this is 178th Street Viaduct where the trolleys and the cars ran over into Manhattan at 178th Street. Again, we're looking in the 1930s. That was a combination waiting room and bathroom. Okay, this is on the 3rd Avenue L at 143rd Street. At this point, it is still double-decked. You had the express on the top and the local on the lower level. And the train looks like it's riding north going toward 149th Street. These are gate cars running on the 3rd Avenue L. These were originally Queens cars. These were all wooden cars, and you had to have a conductor ride between each two cars because those gates were manually operated. This looks like it was on a fan trip because the name is painted on the tops of the cars, and normally these things weren't that clean. The motorman, you'll notice, rode behind the gate in the first enclosure. You were not permitted to ride on the front of those cars. This looks like a pan of what looks like low V cars. Now we have the gate cars that look like they're on Gun Hill Road, where it turns from Webster into White Plains Road line. Here comes the trolley on the white under the L on White Plains. So we know that this is in the late 40s at the latest, because they discontinued the trolleys in the Bronx in 1948. So we know it has to be before then. Look at the taxi cabs, the latest style taxis. And there we have the gate cars again running overhead. Those were considered very labor intensive because you needed, as I said, a motorman for between every two cars. That almost looks like Jerome Avenue around Bedford Park Boulevard. This is done in the late 60s to the early 70s, judging by some of the vehicles there. That looks like a Chevy Greenbrier van. Those look like the rebuilt gate cars. The door is back further. These were what they used also in the 1964 World's Fair. These look like low V cars on the same stretch of road. Believe it or not, the other cars that look newer were actually older than these. Those are marker lights up on the top. They originally did not have headlights on these cars. They were added afterwards for use in the subway. That is a sanitation truck. That is the old courthouse at 161st Street on 30, and that's the 30th Avenue coming around the turn, and then it would make the next curve and go into the 156th Street station on 3rd Avenue again. On the extreme left, I believe, is Alexander Avenue as the train comes around the turn into 161st Street. And these I do believe are low V cars on there. See, those are deck roof cars again. That subway car on the left side of the frame is a rebuilt car. And those were, you see the door is not on the end, and the next car, the door is on the very end. Okay, now we're at the 169th Street, and this is shortly before abandonment, because you can see the housing projects were already built, and this is in color. And the L was demolished in the early 1970s. They had, on these cars, they had metal signs that they put above the number. There was in that window they would put the destination signs in all the cars. Yeah, it's definitely 169th Street, and this train is going north because those projects were on the right side, on the east side of the tracks or the train. We're looking north out of the front of the car, and these were cars in the center track that were laid up for use later. Or maybe toward abandonment, because that track dead ends at the right in front of this car. This is taken at the Gun Hill Road station on the lower level. The 3rd Avenue L came into the lower level on White Plains Road, and they would either turn the train around or bring it into the 238th Street yards on the White Plains Road line. This is looking up at the upper level on the White Plains Road train coming into the station. This looks like 149th Street. As you'll see in a second, there's the Viga, and the Viga was on the west side of 3rd Avenue at that point. That's the Viga on the left, so this train is going north on 3rd Avenue. In fact, you can see this is the latter end because there was no center track at this point. Yeah, and here's the 161st Street, the courthouse on the left. As we turn around to go up 3rd Avenue again, that's Alexander Avenue coming in from the right side. We're now riding southbound, coming, it looks like, toward the 169th Street. We're coming in toward Fordham Road. The white building is SM Rose Chevrolet, and that should be Sears. Previous to that was Rogers Department Store. This is probably 238th Street Yard. It's a funny thing, on the 3rd Avenue L, they did not have signals for the local lines. They never did, as far as I can recall. So since there was a signal, and a fairly modern signal, I would say that was on the White Plains Road line. Eventually, they had signals to some extent on the express line, but not on the local at all, because I figured that the stations were apparently close enough, and they figured, well, they had a visual, they could look at them all and see wherever the next train was. That's coming to Williams Bridge Road, because that dinette store was right on Gun Hill Road and Webster Avenue at that point. As a matter of fact, I remember my parents buying a dinette set in that store. And there again is Hearn's department store in the background. And you know this is later on because this big platform and there was no express track on this at all. Oh, this is a train coming into the 149th Street station again. See, the train's terminated after they cut out the Manhattan part of the 3rd Avenue L in 1955. The 3rd Avenue L terminated at 149th Street, and all those trains were then serviced at the 238th Street yards on the White Plains Road line of the IRT. Oh, now we're at 183rd Street on the 3rd Avenue L. And that's where the train is coming around the turn into the 183rd Street station. It just came down from Fordham Road. Again, this is near the end of service. Those stations were quite ornate on the 3rd Avenue L, and they were heated strictly by a potbelly stove, and they put out a lot of heat in the winter. They were quite comfortable. This is the train coming into the. It looks like coming into the Fordham Road. Well, now this one's leaving the Fordham Road station, I do believe. It was crossing over the first beginning of the clip. It looked like it was coming across Webster Avenue, going over the New York Central tracks. This is a southbound train coming out of Fordham Road Station. This parking lot was used for people going into Sears. This was shot in front of the SM Rose Chevrolet dealership, and if you note the cars, there's still in the days of graffiti. There's still, these things are quite dirty, unlike today's cars, which are absolutely clean. That train was coming off Webster Avenue, going over the New York Central tracks, going into Fordham Road. This is going over the Cross Bronx Expressway. So this is when they had to raise the L quite a few feet to accommodate the Cross Bronx Expressway, and they had to do this while keeping the elevated trains running. It was quite a feat. They jacked it up a little bit at a time because the train still had to keep running till they got it to the height that it is now. And then the Cross Bronx was built under it after that point. And that's still near the end because that train has graffiti on it. It looks like we're looking on top of the mound where the original Bronx County office building was. The seat of Bronx County at one point. This is Williamsbridge and Webster Avenue at this point. After Fordham Road, the train is actually riding on Webster Avenue north until Gun Hill Road. And then the train turns onto Gun Hill Road for that short stretch, and then makes a turn again under the onto White Plains Road, underneath the White Plains Road train. And here you can see the train as it comes, I do believe, onto it's on Gun Hill Road now, and you're looking east on Gun Hill Road because there's the Gun Hill Road station in the background. And again, you can see some of the period cars from the early 70s, including a 66 Mustang. And this clip looks like it's the 238th Street yards on Wharf White Plains Road. They have a big circular track running around the yard, and I've been on that. Okay, now we know this is Gun Hill Road, and this is from the New York Central. In fact, what you just saw was the New Haven train, and this is the New Haven train running south from Gun Hill Road. There's the New York Central engine running light going up to Croton Harmon northbound, and here you have a commuter train running southbound. These were electric engines powered off a third rail. If you grew up in the West Bronx in the neighborhood of University Avenue, McCombs Road, and West Tremont Avenues in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, you no doubt remember the benches that separated University Avenue. It ran from 175th Street north to West Tremont Avenue. For many, the benches were a private country club where events of the day and the week were discussed. Report cards were passed around. If you look closely, you will see and also remember the Park Plaza movie theater, where, as a child, you probably attended those Saturday morning movies that consisted of cartoons and newsreels. The Crosstown number 36 bus, as well as the University Avenue bus number 38, had their stops conveniently located in front of the theater. Those of you who are around or pushing 70 may have started their elementary school at the McCombs School. Back then, you went to elementary school for the first 3 grades and then transferred to either PS 26 or PS 104 for a few more years and then returned again as a middle schooler. Those born after 1940 would only remember McCombs as PS 82 as their junior high school. Along University Avenue were many stores. The Bronx Savings Bank was centrally located along with the Cleaners and Olinsky supermarket. If you like chocolate treats, you might have bought specialty candies at Russ Meyer's, which later became Lohr's. Should you go back today, you would still see the center divide, but there are no longer benches, and the small sapling trees that were planted in the 40s now stand 20 feet high.
With someone like you, on your finger, oh, darling.
It's been a long time coming. The anticipation was excruciating, and I am happy that it is here, because this is the rediscovery of one of the great treasures of the Bronx, one of the jewels of the Bronx, the showplace of the Bronx, the Loew's Paradise Theater. The Loew's Paradise Theater was built in 1929 for $4 million. The architect was a fellow by the name of John Eberson, who specialized in what was called atmospheric theaters. The Paradise is considered to be his masterpiece. The idea was that you would come in from your humdrum, ordinary existence into a fantasy world of glamour and opulence, and taken out of your everyday life into a world that you never would have experienced. And people would come here on special occasions. This was the place for the date for teenagers. It is not known about how many people got married after having a date in the Loew's Paradise in the balcony.
It's great to be here at this historic night. Obviously, we've been waiting a long, long time for the reopening of the Loew's Paradise Theater. And this is a landmark, not only in the Bronx, but in the city. It's a very special place with a lot of wonderful memories for a lot of people. So we're looking forward to making new memories for a new generation of Bronxites. And, you know, the Bronx is thriving as a community, and so this is really a symbol of the revival. It's a very special night for us.
Well, it's great to be here. I haven't been here in so many years. I used to come here all the time on dates in high school and college. We used to go all the way up to the balcony. I saw The Godfather here. I saw Godfather 2 here. And this was the greatest place in the world. And I'm just so delighted that this is happening. I remember downstairs they used to have goldfish swimming around. And then upstairs they had blinking stars and the clouds. We always wondered how they made the clouds move. There's just no place like the Loew's Paradise. And there's no place like the Bronx. You know, I was born in the Bronx and I've lived here all my life and represented it for 28 years, and this is an important piece of the Bronx, so I almost feel like we're being made whole again.
I'm State Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz. I represent part of the Bronx. I grew up in the Bronx. I've lived here all my life, and I spent many, many happy hours at the Loew's Paradise Theater when I was a kid, and also when I was dating my future wife, and even a little bit after that. We haven't been here, of course, in many years, but the fact that the Paradise is back, it shows the tremendous revival that is taking place in the Bronx. So this is really a very exciting day for everybody, I think. And it shows that people have confidence in the Bronx, the fact that somebody was willing to invest the money that they did to bring this this landmark back as an entertainment center.
Ladies and gentlemen, on the count of 3, we will reopen the historic and beautiful Loew's Paradise Theater in the Bronx. It is an historic day, not only in the Bronx, but in the city as a whole and in the region. And it is an historic day even in the country, because this theater was built in 1929, just at the start of the Great Depression. We are now in a revival and a renewal that is historic. And here we go. 1, 2, and 3.
Yep, here comes the 4th Cavalry Stage, right on time, moving along the lonely road through Indian country, heading west. Ha! Ha! Gotta reach the Rocky Mountains by sundown. Up on top, you could be anywhere. The trail doesn't have any signposts after you leave 4th Cavalry. You could be anywhere on the Great Plains in the 1800s, when the West was really wild. Now, this may be Indian territory, and it may look like the Old West, but the time is today, and the place is Freedom Land, a big entertainment park in the Bronx, in the state of New York, just half an hour by subway from Times Square in New York City. Here, they've built the places and the buildings representing 200 years of American history. And riding shotgun across the Great Plains is only one part of the story of our country. Hey, what's happening over there in Chicago? Fire! Look at that! It's the Chicago Fire of 1871. Hurry up, men. We're going to need volunteers for this one. Everybody man the pump. We've got to get water on the fire or the whole city will go. Faster, men. Keep that pump going. Mrs. O'Leary's cow has kicked over a lantern, and the flames are spreading fast. Keep that pump going back there. It's getting out of control. This fireman doesn't look very worried. Here at Freedom Land, they have the Chicago Fire every half hour, every day. And the gas flames behind the windows of those fireproof buildings always go out on schedule. But it's lots of fun because it's make-believe. In Chicago, in 1871, they didn't have fireproof buildings, and the big fire was an important event in American history, brought to life at Freedom Land. Down on Cortlandt Street, they've built little old New York, just the way it was between 1850 and 1890. In those days, horse-drawn trolleys were the latest thing for short trips in the city. If you had to go out of town, maybe as far as 5 miles, you rented a horse if you didn't have one of your own. If you planned a real long trip, 100 miles or more, you took the train. There's the Santa Fe Railroad train, getting ready for the long, dangerous journey to San Francisco. Here's another way people traveled in the 1800s, on a stern-wheel steamboat. All aboard! The paddle wheel starts turning, and away you go. Traveling along, you can get a good idea of how our country looked in the days when there were only a few roads, and the stern-wheelers and riverboats were used to carry most of the heavy freight. The bow of the boat is a good place to stand if you want to see what's coming up around the next bend. If your mother lets you stay there. There's the Santa Fe Special, heading west, just like the days when there was only one railroad line from coast to coast. On board one of the big stern-wheelers at Freedom Land, you take a trip back to the days when there were only a few cities on the east coast of our country, and most of the land west of the Mississippi was a wide-open frontier. So let's go ashore and see some of the other reminders of our past here in this showcase of American history. In the untamed Northwest, you can take a ride in one of the bull boats, traveling past a trapper's cabin back to the time of the historic Lewis and Clark expedition. You'll follow the route of the fur trappers, who were the first white men to see many parts of our country because they had to move farther and farther away from the new villages and towns to trap and hunt. Look, there's a moose looking us over. Don't move, he might charge the boat. There's an Indian carving a totem pole in a village just as it might have looked to a boatload of fur trappers as they kept pushing northwest. These Indians look friendly, but no telling what's coming up around the next bend. If you want to see more of Freedom Land, the best thing to do is go up, way up, high. Riding in an ore bucket from the Tucson Mining Company, high above the buildings and the people. From here, you can see most of Freedom Land and pick out the spots you want to visit next time. 205 acres of fun and tradition. From San Francisco in 1906, across the Great Plains of the 1800s, through the old Southwest of 1890, to the not-so-distant future at Satellite City. 200 years of American history. From the days when herds of buffalo roamed the West to the present and beyond. There are thousands of things to see, too many to look at on this trip, but all of them are fun, and all of them will help you appreciate the facts in your history books. This is history brought to life. The history of the country that gave this place its name, Freedom Land. Now it's time we got back on solid ground again, back to the Bronx in the state of New York. So long.